Chapter 540. Nian was a good student from the capital-affiliated primary school. Although when she stayed by Chunxi's side, it was inevitable that she would throw a little tantrum, but her worldview was still very correct. As a matter of fact, after seeing the girl suddenly cry, Nian immediately stopped talking and sat silently on the horse's back. Even when Chunxi wanted to carry her down, she didn't resist. "Dad, I didn't bully her." The little girl felt wronged. Otherwise, with her usual personality, she would have rushed up to comfort the girl. Speaking of which, Nian was now 9 years old, and had already formed a more complete concept of consumption. Therefore, in her mind, she was a consumer who spent money to ride the horse here, so she didn't think she did anything wrong. Maybe the girl saw that she was having fun riding the horse, so she wanted to steal it from her? After all, children like to steal other people's toys. Similar things happened to Wenwen and Mingming too many times, so Nian was already used to it. Nian still didn't understand what was going on. Chunxi comforted her in a low voice, then held her hand and stood aside, silently waiting for the other party's parents to come. The child was crying very loudly. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was wailing. Therefore, not long after she started crying, a well-dressed lady ran over from the other side of the path. After hearing her daughter's crying, the lady ran over in her high heels. Perhaps it was because she paid a lot of attention to maintaining her appearance, so it was impossible to tell the woman's true age from her appearance. "Nan, what's going on? Who bullied you? Come on, don't cry. Mommy will help you." With the comfort of the lady, the little girl finally stopped crying. Then she angrily pointed at Nian and said, "It's her. She rode my Snow White without my permission." Perhaps it was because she had watched too many cartoons, but this white horse held a very high position in the little girl's heart. Therefore, she could not accept anyone else riding her white horse other than herself. "Hey, what's wrong with you guys? Don't you know who this horse belongs to? Who are they? A professional coach? Or a paramedic? Who agreed to let them ride up? I pay hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to your club, and this is how you take care of my horses? Don't you know how expensive my horse is? Hurry up and ask your manager to give me an explanation." The cause of this incident was very simple. After listening for a while, the woman figured out the crux of the matter, so she pointed the muzzle directly at the staff on the side. The staff member felt bitter inside. Facing the woman's accusation, he opened his mouth a little cowardly, but in the end he couldn't say a word. He could only stand there and take the scolding with his head down. In fact, this kind of mistake was not easy to make. This was because whenever the private horse of a big client arrived at the club, the staff would carefully observe it for a period of time. Only after confirming that these big clients rarely came to the racecourse would they list the horse as a spare tire. The horse had been in the club for more than half a year, but the owner had never ridden it. Today they had pulled it out for Nian to ride for a while, but they didn't expect that something would happen. As the owner of the horse, the little girl's age was about the same as Nian's, so she could only come to the racecourse to practice during the holidays. She was a child, so naturally, she couldn't be like adults and pay attention to formalities. She wanted to see her horse as soon as possible, so after arriving at the club, she rushed directly to the racecourse, so that the staff didn't have time to mediate. "I'm sorry, Miss Zhuang. Today's incident was caused by the mistakes of our staff. Please calm down first, don't be too agitated." After hearing the commotion outside, the manager hurried to the racecourse. The woman seemed to recognize him, so she immediately turned the muzzle and scolded the manager. One had to know that this lady in front of him was a big client of the club. Who could afford to offend her? Therefore, no matter how bad the woman's scolding was, the coach and staff just stood aside and didn't dare to say a word. The manager kept nodding in agreement, hoping that the woman would calm down. In fact, today's incident had nothing to do with Nian, it was all the club's fault. After listening for a while, Chunxi couldn't be bothered with the people in front of him. He looked down at Nian and asked, "Nian, do you still want to ride? If you want to ride, I'll get them to find you another horse, okay?" "Okay." Hearing this, Nian immediately nodded. Although her father didn't say it clearly, she roughly understood the situation and knew that she couldn't ride this white horse in front of her anymore. Therefore, The little girl reluctantly looked at the white horse next to her, then quickly walked out of the racecourse under Chen Shi's lead. Stop. Where are you going? The woman was still angry at the club for using her horse without permission. Suddenly seeing that Chen Shi and his daughter wanted to leave, the woman was instantly angry, so she directly stopped them. After hearing the woman's reprimand, Chen Shi immediately stopped. He frowned and turned around to say something. The club manager directly blocked in front of him, then said to the woman with a smile, Miss Zhuang, these two are also members of our club. Today's incident was mainly due to our mistake in the work arrangement. I hope you don't take it to heart. Why don't we do this? In order to compensate you for your loss, I can represent the club to give you a free maintenance and management package, plus a set of equestrian clothes. The manager's attitude was still correct. He took the initiative to ask the woman for compensation, and at the same time, he took all the responsibility. He only hoped that the woman wouldn't vent her anger on others. However, even if the woman knew that today's incident was caused by the club, she couldn't accept Nian swaggering away like that. Didn't she see that her child was still crying? Therefore, if Nian didn't apologize, the woman would definitely not let her go easily. Do you know how much this horse costs? What if it breaks? You pay for it. No, she has to apologize to Nan today before she can leave. For a moment, not only was the club manager stunned, even Chen Shi suspected that he had misheard. Apologize? Was this woman crazy? Or was her worldview distorted? Chapter 541. Apologize. After hearing the woman's righteous request, Chen Shi couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then he couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. Did I hear wrongly? Seeing Chen Shi's completely unrepentant appearance, the woman suddenly couldn't help but get angry. So, she immediately turned her gun and aimed it at Chen Shi. She seemed to have reason and evidence to back it up. What, is there a problem? Is it so hard to say sorry? Your child is about the same age as my Nan. As a parent, haven't you taught her that she needs to have basic manners when interacting with others? This horse was originally bought for Nan as a birthday gift. Normally, even I, as her mother, can't ride it, let alone strangers like you. Your daughter rode Nan's horse without Nan's permission. Do you think this kind of behavior is any different from stealing? After hearing this, Chen Shi couldn't help but frown deeper. He opened his mouth and wanted to refute the woman's point of view, but the woman didn't give him a chance to speak. She continued, Of course, you can also push the blame to the club. Then I want to ask you in return. Someone handed you a knife. After you kill someone, can you push the blame to the person who handed you the knife? May I ask which law stipulates this? After hearing the woman's words, Chen Shi was suddenly angered by her and laughed. In this life, he could be considered to have lived for hundreds of years. He had come into contact with unreasonable people, but he had never seen someone who could be so unreasonable to this extent. Was this a crosstalk? If it weren't for the fact that the other party was a woman, Chen Shi would have taken Nian and left. What are you laughing at? Do you think I said something wrong? Also, I'm not a petty person. I don't have the leisure to argue with a child. I just hope that as a parent, you can understand that educating a child is not a very easy thing to do. There's a good saying. If you make a mistake, you have to admit it. If you are beaten, you have to stand upright. The reason why I want her to apologize to Nan is to help your child establish a correct sense of right and wrong. At the same time, I want to prevent Nan's heart from continuing to be hurt. Tell me, is my request really too much? Needless to say, when a woman came up with a crooked argument, she could really turn black into white. If it was an introverted person who had encountered such a situation, perhaps he would have hurriedly asked his child to apologize to the other party and take the blame for this matter without knowing what was going on. Anyway, it was just 3 words. I'm sorry. What's the big deal? The woman felt that her request was not excessive at all. But it was a pity. Chen Shi and Nian were not the kind of muddle-headed good guys. We choose to be kind, but that doesn't mean that we will condone fallacies. Outside the stable. After the woman expressed her opinion, she looked at Chen Shi and his daughter confidently. Nian, do you think what Auntie said makes sense? Shouldn't we apologize to her? Chun-Shi couldn't be bothered with this crazy woman in front of him, so he lowered his head and looked at the little girl next to him. As expected, as soon as Chun-Shi finished speaking, Nian quickly shook her head. Seeing this, Chun-Shi couldn't help but nod in satisfaction. Then he raised his head and looked at this crazy woman in front of him. Chun-Shi originally wanted to take this opportunity to discuss the child's education with this woman. But what he didn't expect was, just as he was about to refute the woman, Nian suddenly stood up and said to the woman very loudly, "Auntie, you're secretly changing the concept." Hearing this, the woman couldn't help but be stunned. Chun-Shi lowered his head and looked at the little girl with a surprised expression. Wasn't that right? Wasn't this woman secretly changing the concept? Auntie, I can promise you, if I really did something wrong, I will definitely apologize to my sister very sincerely. But what happened today really has nothing to do with me. I didn't know that this horse belonged to my sister, so I listened to the coach's arrangement and rode it. This uncle just said that this was a mistake in the arrangement of work. If you want me to apologize just because my little sister is crying, then I will cry too. As she spoke, Nian's voice couldn't help but lower. It was obvious that the woman's rude request had ruined her good mood, to the extent that she had become somewhat listless. Nian, let's go. After Nian's voice fell, without waiting for the woman to react, Chun-Shi directly held Nian's hand and turned to walk to the lounge. Chun-Shi's patience had reached its limit. Since Nian had said what he wanted to say, he didn't need to add anything else. As the saying goes, when a scholar meets a soldier, he can't reason clearly. Instead of continuing to be entangled with this crazy woman, it was better to leave when she was distracted and save his ears some peace. Looking at the back of the father and daughter leaving, the woman's face was a little uncertain. Actually, if those words were said by Chun-Shi, the woman might have 10,000 fallacies to say. But if it was Nian who said it, for a moment, she really didn't know how to continue. Did she really have to argue with a child? So no matter how angry she was, the woman could only stand there sullenly, and she couldn't find a way to vent her anger. Seeing this, the club manager immediately moved in front of the woman, ready to mediate the situation. This farce seemed to be coming to an end. But at this moment, the little girl next to the woman burst into tears again. After all, not every child could be as reasonable as Nian, so she couldn't accept this at all. They secretly rode on her horse, but they didn't even apologize. Once she thought of Nian riding on the back of the horse, that valiant feeling instantly made the little girl feel uncomfortable from the bottom of her heart. It was like a fishbone in her throat. Don't think that children don't have schemes. At least at this moment, the little girl suddenly had a very firm thought in her heart, and that was, cry. She must cry until her mother made them apologize to her. Therefore, she immediately took on the posture of Meng Jiangnu, sat on the ground, and started bawling her eyes out. This time the woman panicked. But no matter how she comforted her, the little girl didn't listen. Instead, she cried and kept repeating, "She rode on my horse, she rode on my horse." It was like Tang Seng chanted the golden hoop spell. Soon, the woman was completely overwhelmed by her daughter's crying. Seeing that Chun-Shi and his daughter's figures were about to disappear at the end of the road, the woman seemed to have finally made a decision. She couldn't help but say to the little girl with a fierce expression, "Darling, don't cry first. Stand up first. Mother will make the decision for you. She must apologize to you today." Then, the woman directly turned to look in the direction she came from, and shouted in that direction, "Ah Biao, stop them for me, don't let them go. Jiutian Divine Emperor." Chapter 542. Unlike other emerging industries, the moment the martial arts craze arose, it received all kinds of support from the government, both overt and covert. In just 2 short years, the martial arts club relied on the most basic functions of strengthening the body and retaining beauty to successfully replace the fitness industry. At the same time, it also indirectly squeezed out the survival space of the security industry. Now that the trend of practicing martial arts was becoming more and more intense, everyone knew a few practical moves, and social security naturally became a big problem on the table of all levels of government. As the saying goes, where there is a demand, there is a market. Since the market demand was so huge, many large martial arts clubs took advantage of the situation to launch private bodyguard services. At the same time, they also established a cooperative relationship with the Public Security Bureau to assist the police in handling cases in a way similar to the auxiliary police. The Biao that the woman mentioned was the private bodyguard she hired from the Beijing Martial Arts Club some time ago. Since the rich were willing to buy a horse for their daughter to play with, why would they scrimp on security issues? Therefore, the moment the woman finished speaking, a burly man in a tang suit quickly walked toward Chen Shi and his daughter. Black suits were no longer popular nowadays. Tang suits and Han costumes were the current trend, and at the same time, it was also the standard for martial artists. This was because only martial artists who registered with the Wu Lian would wear a special Wu Lian symbol on their chest to confirm their identity as martial artists. Just like the police uniform, the Wu Lian symbol was absolutely not allowed to be impersonated. Therefore, as long as someone was wearing a tang suit with a Wu Lian symbol on his chest, that person must be a powerful martial artist, and the kind who could fight 100 people alone. Sir, please wait. Biao was burly and had dark skin. At first glance, one could tell that he was the kind of martial artist who often trained hard under the sun. Although he had tried his best to restrain himself, his fierce temperament still frightened the club manager next to him. Miss Zhuang, this. The club manager wanted to stand up and smooth things over. But before he could finish speaking, the woman had already said coldly, "Don't worry, I am a person of status. How can I make things difficult for them for no reason? As long as they bow their heads and apologize to Nan Nan, then I will pretend that today's incident never happened. My request." At this point, the woman suddenly paused. Then she looked at the manager and asked, "It's not too much, right?" Hearing this, the manager could only squeeze out a bitter smile. He nodded with some difficulty and replied, "Not at all, not at all." It was obvious that this matter had completely become a matter of face. Women were rich. At the same time, he was also a person of status. Therefore, she could not accept how Chen Shi and his daughter treated her and her mother. Apologize. He had to apologize. If they didn't apologize, Chen Shi and his daughter wouldn't be leaving the club today. After hearing the woman's order, Biao quickly caught up with Chen Shi and his daughter. He tried to ask Chen Shi to stop, but Chen Shi acted as if he didn't hear him. He continued to whisper to Nian Nian while swaggering into the lounge. The lounge was not far ahead. Seeing that Chen Shi and his daughter were about to enter the lounge, Biao suddenly became anxious. After all, he couldn't forcibly kidnap Chen Shi and his daughter in front of the boss in front of so many people, could he? Once this kind of behavior was recorded and posted online, Wu Lian would definitely not let him off easily. Biao was more or less depressed in his heart. If it were anyone else, after seeing him dressed like a martial artist, they would definitely stay where they were and obediently wait for him to deal with them. However, Chen Shi didn't take him seriously at all. Along the way, he was talking and laughing with Nian Nian. It seemed that he was just short of turning around and directly saying to him, "Come and hit me." Martial artists couldn't hit people in public, but they could intimidate people. Therefore, after thinking for a while, Biao exerted force on his feet. Like jumping high, he directly jumped over Chen Shi and his daughter's heads, and then opened his arms to stop them. This jump, it was at least 2 meters high, right? The manager of the club was dumbfounded. "Sir, I'm sorry. Our boss said that you can't leave. I hope you won't make it difficult for me. Please go back." Biao was still very polite. At least he didn't hit them right away. Therefore, after Chen Shi sized Biao up, he smiled and asked in return, "Go back. Do you want me to go back and apologize? You saw what happened just now, right? Do you think we did something wrong?" Biao had been standing not far behind the woman, so he naturally knew the cause of this incident. Therefore, after hearing Chen Shi's question, Biao's face showed a slightly strange expression. "I'm sorry, sir. I was just following orders. The boss is not a bad person. She was just angry that Nan Nan was wronged. It's just an apology. As long as you are willing to apologize to her, I promise that she won't make it difficult for you." Biao's words were tactful enough. He hoped that Chen Shi would give the woman a way out, so that he could go back and report to his boss. However, what Biao didn't expect was, after hearing his words, Chunxi suddenly shook his head and laughed, because he was very disappointed with Biao's answer. The rise of the martial arts craze actually meant that the spirit of martial arts was declining. A martial artist like Qin Shihuiqing, who had a strong mind and conviction, probably couldn't be found now, right? Qin Shihuiqing had left Earth for 2 years. Therefore, many times, Chunxi couldn't help but think of that willful and stubborn sister-in-law. Fortunately, the defensive magic treasure he'd given Qin Wanqing hadn't been activated. This meant that Qin Wanqing hadn't encountered any life-threatening danger for now, and this caused Chunxi to feel much more at ease. Because of Biao, Chunxi suddenly thought of Qin Shihuiqing. However, very soon, this thought was completely thrown to the back of his mind. "I'm sorry, I can't do it. Please don't make it difficult for me," Chunxi said to Biao with a serious face. After that, he walked past Biao with Nian. "Sir, please wait." Seeing that Chunxi was still going to leave, Biao directly stretched out his arm to block his way. "Please make way." Without any superfluous movements, Chunxi directly bumped into Biao's arm. Like a train slowly moving, Biao tried to block Chunxi with force. However, it was fine if he didn't use force. But this force, a huge force that was enough to suffocate people, suddenly burst out from Chunxi's body. Bang! With a muffled sound, Biao's whole body flew out instantly as if he was hit by a train. At that moment, Biao was completely stunned. He only felt that his mind was blank. When he finally came back to his senses, he found that he was sitting under a big tree by the roadside, and the lounge where Chunxi and his daughter were was at least 10 meters away from him. Biao touched his chest and his arm. There was not a trace of injury on his body, not even a trace of pain. It was like a dream. When he woke up, he was already lying under this tree. "You," Biao pointed at Chunxi, as if he wanted to say something. However, when Chunxi looked back at him, Biao suddenly felt like a bucket of cold water was suddenly poured on him, and his whole body slightly trembled. "Well, I saw that some readers seem to have misunderstood. In fact, I'm not writing a face slap. I want to use this incident to indirectly tell you about the changes in Nian in the past 2 years, and the changes in the whole society. In the end, it seems that I failed again." Chapter 543. With a flash of inspiration in his mind, Biao seemed to have suddenly thought of something. He couldn't help but widen his eyes slightly. He looked at Chunxi in horror and asked, You are a necromancer?" It was no wonder that Biao was so shocked. As an ancient inheritance passed down from ancient times, the necromancer inheritance was much more mysterious than the martial arts inheritance that rose later. Judging from the current situation in Wuxia, although the martial arts craze was fierce and had forcibly opened up a new era of martial arts practice, there were only a few strong people who could really practice transforming strength, and even practice to the gang state. The reason was not that there was no martial arts genius among the 1.3 billion people in Wuxia, but it was because of the inherent flaw of the martial arts inheritance. After all, martial arts was only the product of the necromancer inheritance's decline. It could not be compared with the inheritance of the necromancer. Did you not see how many of the masters at the top of the heaven list had really entered the Tao through martial arts? They relied on their age, experience, and combined with the cultivation methods of the necromancer to cultivate both internal and external, thus stepping into the celestial being realm in one fell swoop. And this was the real reason why Yu Jingxi's incomplete cultivation method was sold for 5 million. It had been more than 4 years since the Wu Lian officially implemented the first 5-year plan. Seeing that the martial arts craze was getting more and more intense, the necromancer inheritance had not caused much of a stir. Was there no one left in the necromancer inheritance? Obviously not. Therefore, it was necessary to mention the classic slogan that Wang Chuanju shouted at an internal meeting. That was, "Grasp the sequence of the times, subvert and create the future." With the momentum of a thunderbolt, they forcefully incorporated all the necromancer inheritances in Wuxia, and then secretly promoted the rise of the martial arts craze. When the ordinary people gradually accepted the existence of the martial arts, which was far beyond ordinary people, the first 5-year plan would be considered to have been successfully achieved. This plan was also called the Tinder Plan by the Wu Lian. Yu Jingzi had always thought that the Wu Lian was suppressing the cultivation inheritance, so he took the risk of preaching under Tiananmen Square, so he would not understand how narrow-minded he was. In fact, as a State Department, how could the Wu Lian make any decisions that would harm the country's interests? Grasp the sequence of the times, subvert and create the future. Did they really think that this was just a slogan? Revolution does not have to be initiated by the masses. It can also be carried out by the masses led by the state. Since the country wanted to take the lead in starting a revolution, problems would follow. Whose life were they going to overthrow? The answer was obvious. That was, the revolution is the fate of the whole world. It had to be said that Wu Lian was very ambitious. Even if the first 5-year plan had not been completed, the second 5-year plan was already in its infancy. The main goal of the second 5-year plan was to select the most talented martial artists and grant them the corresponding necromancer inheritance to ensure that these people would obey the Wu Lian in the future. In the past, a martial artist's actual combat ability would not be inferior to a necromancer of the same level. They might even be able to crush a necromancer of the same level. But one had to know that things were different now. The heaven and earth spirit qi began to recover, which meant that the cultivation speed of the necromancer lineage began to increase by leaps and bounds. Although martial artists also benefited a lot from this, they still could not compare to necromancers who could draw qi into their bodies. Therefore, under the deliberate guidance of the Wu Lian, a complete and systematic promotion path from ordinary people to martial artists to necromancers appeared out of thin air. Biao also wanted to become a necromancer. However, he neither had enough merit to exchange for cultivation methods from the Wu Lian nor enough money to buy incomplete cultivation methods from the dark web. Therefore, becoming a disciple of a certain necromancer by chance became the most feasible method. Here was something to mention. The Wu Lian did not restrict necromancers from accepting disciples. Therefore, while the martial arts club was developing rapidly in society, the necromancer inheritance was also expanding in secret. However, because the necromancer lineage paid more attention to talent, those who were lucky enough to become a disciple of a necromancer were simply too rare. Over the years, Biao had gone deep into famous mountains and great rivers in an attempt to become a disciple of a certain immortal. Unfortunately, no sect was willing to take him in. Chunxi had just shown a little of his skill, which not only sent him flying more than 10 meters away, but also did not hurt him at all. What was such a wonderful skill if not a necromancer's skill? Therefore, the moment Biao came to his senses, he jumped up from the ground like a carp. "Senior!" Biao shouted as he quickly caught up with Chunxi and his daughter. Chunxi did not pay attention to him. Seeing that Chunxi and his daughter were about to enter the lounge, Biao was so excited that he bent his knees and knelt heavily on the ground in front of everyone present. "I am too Biao. I have long heard of the necromancer's elegant demeanor. It is my honor to meet you today. Please, the great era was coming." Therefore, like every martial artist who was depressed, Biao had the idea of becoming a disciple of Chunxi the moment he confirmed his identity. However, what Biao did not expect was, before he could finish his words, Chunxi directly sealed his mouth with her true essence, so that he could only lie on the ground and muffled whimpers. Nianyan noticed something strange behind her, and was about to look back when Chunxi suddenly reached out and put his arm around her shoulder. He lowered his head and asked with a smile, "Nianyan, did you feel wrong just now? Do you want Daddy to buy you a horse too? Then you can ride it whenever you want, and you don't have to worry about being kicked off the horse in the future." After hearing Chunxi's words, the little fellow's eyes suddenly lit up. Therefore, she immediately ignored the movement behind her and excitedly hugged Chunxi and said coquettishly, "Daddy is so nice. Then let's go. Daddy will take you to see the horse." Chunxi pretended to leave. But after taking 2 steps, Nianyan seemed to have suddenly thought of something. She could not help but pull Chunxi and ask hesitantly, "Daddy, is the horse very expensive?" Why do you ask this?" "Because beef is very expensive." Looking at Nianyan's serious face, Chunxi suddenly did not know whether to laugh or cry. Seeing this, the little fellow was a little confused, so she continued to say, "Daddy, if the horse is too expensive, let's not buy it." The coach said that the horse can only be ridden here, but it is so far away from home. We have to take a long ride every time we come here. Moreover, I definitely won't have time to come again after school starts. Buying a horse but can't ride it a few times, it feels so wasteful. After hearing Nian Nian's words, Chenxi was suddenly shocked. Did this child know to save money for him? When did she become so sensible? Chenxi did not care about money at all, so he always had an attitude of giving Nian Nian whatever she wanted. He did not expect that under these circumstances, Nian Nian did not develop the habit of spending money. Instead, she learned how to look at the value of things correctly. After all, the things in this world, there was no such thing as expensive or not, only value or not. The father and daughter discussed the value of the horse as they walked quickly into the lounge. At this time, Biao looked like he was finally untied. He could not help but have a complicated expression on his face. Then he slowly stood up from the ground. He stood motionless outside the lounge, completely ignoring the strange looks around him. After a full 5 minutes, the woman could not take it anymore and walked quickly in her high heels to Biao's side. "Biao, what are you doing? I told you to stop them. Look at what you've done. You've completely disgraced me." Perhaps it was because she could not accept the fact that Biao knelt in front of Chenxi. In a moment of anger, the woman could no longer maintain her usual elegance. So much so that she directly swore in front of everyone. As the boss, the woman obviously had the right to criticize her bodyguard. But what she did not expect was, after hearing her scolding, Biao changed his usual reserved image and said to her with a serious face, "Boss, this is the last time I'm calling you boss. In the past, because of my identity, there were some words that I could not say. Today's incident left a deep impression on me. I hope it can inspire you. What's right is right, and what's wrong is wrong. You shouldn't only look at things from your own point of view. This is not good. It's really not good." Speaking of this, Biao suddenly looked at the woman deeply. "You're lucky this time. I'm also lucky. I don't think there will be a next time." After saying this, Biao did not care whether the woman could understand or not. After saluting her politely, Biao turned around and walked straight to the club's door. "You." The woman was stunned for a long time. After seeing that Biao had walked far away, she stomped her foot and could not help but curse. "Bastard. Just you wait. I'm not done with you." Chapter 544. Perhaps because she didn't want to see that woman again, Nian Nian sat in the lounge for a while before she took the initiative to go home. Her mood was a bit down, but it was understandable. After being reprimanded for no reason, no one would be in a good mood. Although she wanted to use the method of buying a horse to make her happy, Nian Nian hesitated again and again, and in the end rejected this irrational spending proposal. It was obvious that she was a good child who knew how to save money. Seeing the little girl's lack of interest, Chenxi took out his phone and made another suggestion that was enough to arouse her interest. That was Crazy Racing Cartrider. Anyway, both were vehicles, but one was for riding and the other was for sitting. The difference didn't seem to be too big. Therefore, after Chenxi briefly described the game of karting, the little girl's interest was immediately piqued. She even forgot to change her clothes and wanted to pull Chenxi out. As for the unpleasantness just now, the moment the father and daughter walked out of the club, the unpleasantness was all thrown to the back of their minds. It wasn't that they were heartless, but because Nian Nian was kind and Chenxi was generous, the father and daughter simply couldn't let this matter go. Instead of wasting time on these unpleasant things, it was better to seize the time and think of other ways to make themselves happy again. And this was obviously the way of a smart person. This was Nian Nian's ordinary day. In this ordinary day, she would forget all the unpleasantness and only remember the moments that made her laugh. She didn't have a lot of summer homework, nor did she have a variety of tutoring classes. In her last summer of elementary school, Chenxi just wanted her to play to her heart's content. In the blink of an eye, Nian Nian was 9 years old. She was already very mature. Speaking of which, Chenxi now regretted letting Nian Nian skip grades. Because Nian Nian skipped 2 grades, her classmates were all 2 or 3 years older than her. In just one more year, these classmates who lived with her day and night could no longer be called children, but teenagers. Since his classmates had already grown up into teenagers, how could the little guy who spent all day with them not be affected and continue to be young? After all, 11 or 12 years old was the main stage of puberty. Body shape and facial features had significant changes, and the appearance gradually began to resemble that of an adult. Therefore, as long as the child officially stepped into this stage, many parents would suddenly realize, how could in the blink of an eye, the child had already grown so big, although it was a good thing for the child to grow up. But for the parents, it seemed that it was better for the child to never grow up, because once the child grew up, the child may no longer be so affectionate to their parents, nor would they be as obedient as before. They had their own thoughts and learned to be rebellious and strong. Among them, the more extreme ones completely ignored family ties and turned to regard love as an existence more important than their own lives. As a result, the question of if your mother and I fell into the water at the same time, who would you save first, could actually become the so-called new era's problem. It was really sad and laughable. To be honest, as Nian grew older and older, Chunxi couldn't help but worry about personal gains and losses. He didn't want to interfere too much with Nian's life, but he was also worried that too much indulgence might lead the child astray. What's more, cultivation and raising children were different. One only needed to work hard to become an immortal. If raising children relied on hard work, the result might be counterproductive. For example, the Peking University matricide case that caused a sensation in the country some time ago. Just thinking about it made one's scalp tingle. Of course, only the parties involved knew who was right and who was wrong. Chunxi couldn't care about others, so he could only do his best to create a complete and happy childhood for Nian before she grew up. Perhaps many years later, she would suddenly realize how precious these memories were. Because of the continuous recovery of the spirit energy of heaven and earth, the wheel of history quietly took a sharp turn in these seemingly ordinary days. On the surface, everything seemed calm, but in private, undercurrents were already surging. Earth was ushering in an unknown great change, but Chunxi was still obsessed with his great cause of raising children all day long. Unknowingly, more than 2 months of summer vacation had ended just like that. Nian ushered in her 6th grade life, which also meant that his sister-in-law had left Earth for more than 2 months. Perhaps it was because Qin Xueqing had never left Earth so many times. Chunxi couldn't help but think of this willful and stubborn sister-in-law. A little rookie whose cultivation was only at the golden core stage, actually dared to go to the Supreme Palace enclosure alone to cause trouble. It would be a lie to say that Chunxi wasn't worried at all. But the good thing was, the Dharma treasure that he had given to Qin Xueqing to protect herself hadn't been activated, which meant that Qin Xueqing hadn't encountered any life-threatening danger for the time being. This also made Chunxi feel a lot more at ease. As long as she was fine, it was fine. In fact, long before Qin Xueqing set off, Chunxi had already given her a detailed extracurricular tutoring. He also used his true essence to simulate an image to show his sister-in-law everything he knew about the Supreme Palace enclosure. The scenery there was as beautiful as a painting. Without asking about spring and autumn, there was no winter or summer. 10 miles of peach blossoms were planted, wine was brewed and tea was brewed, and the clouds on the horizon were like rosy clouds, of course. In addition to the beautiful scenery, there were also countless aristocratic families and cultivation inheritances there. This was a cultivation holy land comparable to heavenly spiral. In short, that place was very dangerous. In order to make his sister-in-law put away her strong personality, Chunxi even deliberately exaggerated the combined strength of the Jade Clear Grotto Heaven and the Xianyuan family. Chunxi was overthinking this. Qin Xueqing was very strong, but she wasn't stupid at all. Therefore, as soon as the star Cha flew out of the Haute Nebula, Qin Xueqing obediently listened to Chunxi's instructions and immediately used her Dharma treasure to conceal her whereabouts. After that, Qin Xueqing flew straight to the Supreme Palace enclosure according to the coordinates that Chunxi had provided. This was Qin Xueqing's first time at the Supreme Palace enclosure. Therefore, when she realized that the Supreme Palace enclosure in front of her was very different from the true essence projection that Chunxi had provided, Qin Shueqing didn't choose to leave. Instead, she chose to continue flying toward this mysterious planet. Yes, the Supreme Palace enclosure had changed. It was no longer a floating continental plate in the universe. Instead, it had become a complete planet that was forcefully pieced together by 3 enclosures. After all, Chunxi wasn't an immortal emperor. He, who was far away on Earth, had no idea what had happened at the Supreme Palace enclosure. Therefore, when Qin Shueqing found an area that matched the geographical features of Ning Province, according to the true essence projection that Chunxi had provided, she drove the Star Cha directly to the sky above Ning Province where the Xianyuan family was located. Chapter 545. The current appearance of the Supreme Palace enclosure was indeed a little strange. Compared to the Supreme Palace enclosure in Chunxi's impression, the current Supreme Palace enclosure was at least 3 or 4 times larger. Therefore, if Chunxi was still here, he should be keenly aware that the uneven irregular sphere covered with a layer of grayish-white fog in front of him was the so-called 3 enclosures. Yuan pronounced Yuan. Homonym San Yuan. Because of the rare phenomenon of the intersection of the 3 enclosures in 100 years, the Supreme Palace enclosure, Tianshi enclosure, and Ziwei enclosure were like 3 pieces of mud that were forcefully glued together by an unknown force. And it was precisely because of this that the 3 enclosures were not as round and natural as other planets in the universe. Instead, they looked a little strange and awkward. If one really had to describe it, it was like a deformed potato covered with white mold. The current appearance of the Supreme Palace enclosure was very different from the true essence projection that Chunxi provided to Qin Shueqing before. However, after thinking for a while, Qin Shueqing did not choose to return to Earth for the time being. Instead, she continued to fly to this mysterious planet. On the one hand, it was because Qin Shueqing did not know the details. On the other hand, it was because she had other purposes for this trip. Capturing Changhua was an excuse. Her real purpose was to gain experience. Since it was an experience, she should naturally have the courage to take risks and have the courage to fight. Therefore, even after Qin Shueqing noticed that something was wrong, she still did not turn back. In the end, her sister-in-law still came to the Supreme Palace enclosure. But what she never expected was, after she piloted Xingcha and passed through the grayish-white fog on the surface of the planet, the first thing that came into view was not the scenic spot that Chunxi described, but a dead land full of death and desolation. What happened to the picturesque scenery there? The former mountains, valleys, and blessed lands had now become deserts and canyons. It was as if a world war had just happened. The entire world was filled with a strong smell of blood. Suddenly, a gust of strong wind swept over, instantly lifting up a cloud of yellow sand and flying rocks that covered the sky. Qin Shueqing stood on Xingcha and observed carefully. Only then did she discover that there were a few people fighting not far away. Moreover, both sides were very strong. They were far from what she could handle. Void Pierce, since your junior brother, Reverend Cave Spirit, has already subdued the sacred cult, why are you still bitterly holding on? How about this? I will count to 3. Everyone will stop. Then, you will obediently follow me back to meet the sect leader. Maybe the sect leader will be happy and confer you the title of Lord of Supremacy. There were 3 people confronting each other in the field. One of them was Reverend Chengxiu, who had once met Chunxi. In the past, how famous would the 4 great spiritual masters of the Jade Clear Grotto Heaven be? Now it was unknown what kind of unforeseen event had happened, to the extent that Reverend Pierce Void was actually like a stray dog at this moment, being chased all the way here from 1,000 miles away. Bah! How could Junior Cave Spirit be someone who is afraid of death? You keep talking about the sacred cult on your left and right. Why don't you take a look at what your so-called sacred cult has done? If it weren't for those despicable and shameless methods, how could Junior Cave Spirit have fallen into your trap? It's useless to say more. Since you want to bring me back to report on your mission, then come and try. While speaking, Reverend Chengxiu was rapidly fighting with the other 2. The strength of the 3 people in the field was roughly the same. They should all be supreme being existences. With such a lineup, even if Chunxi was here, he could only temporarily avoid their attacks, let alone Qin Shueqing, who was just a mere gold core realm cultivator. Therefore, Qin Xueqing could only pilot Xingcha and carefully hide in the sky. Although this Xingcha had been meticulously modified by Chen Shi, if it wasn't for the fierce battle in the field, her whereabouts would have been discovered long ago. Qin Xueqing had always been fearless. But at this moment, she was really scared. No wonder Supreme Palace enclosure had become like this. It turned out to be caused by the battle between these people. As the saying goes, one can know the depth of autumn by seeing a leaf, and one can know the whole leopard by seeing a spot. Even the supreme being Reverend Chongxu was chased all over the world. Then, how could heavenly venerable existences like the patriarch of the Xianyuan clan and the patriarch of the Tuoba clan stay out of it? It could be seen that this war had been going on for a long time. So much so that Supreme Palace enclosure had completely changed its appearance under the baptism of war. The former blessed land was now a desert wasteland. And with the means of immortal cultivators, could it be that they couldn't turn Supreme Palace enclosure into its former appearance? Therefore, this also meant that from the moment the war began, the flames of war had never been extinguished. The intensity of the war was simply unimaginable. It had been 2 years. The flames of war had burned every corner of Supreme Palace enclosure. Its scale had even far surpassed the Second World War on Earth, reaching the extent of nuclear weapons bombarding each other. Therefore, the cultivation Holy Land in Chen Shi's memory had become such a dilapidated place today. Battles and killings. Mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Looking at the 3 people fighting in the field, Qin Xueqing hesitated for a moment. In the end, she did not choose to leave. Instead, she hid at the side and continued to spy on the battle. Void Pierce stage stop. I believe you also know. Joining our sect will only bring you benefits and no harm. Why do you have to struggle so hard? During the battle, the supreme being from the holy sect kept persuading Reverend Chongxu to surrender. Upon hearing that, Reverend Chongxu refused to answer at all. Instead, he took the initiative to attack the 2 of them. I know you have resentment in your heart. But, if we don't flatten your jade clear heavenly abode first, how can the holy sect unify Supreme Palace enclosure? As long as you are willing to lower your head and submit, I can promise you on behalf of the sect master that I will definitely help you reignite the incense in the future, and ensure that the inheritance of your jade clear heavenly abode will not be destroyed. What do you think? Although the battle between both parties was very intense, the supreme being of the holy sect did not kill them. As a result, Reverend Chongxu still had the upper hand even though he was fighting against 2 of them alone. Of course, this advantage was obviously illusory. The battle between insightful emptiness realm experts would not be as straightforward as the battle between gold core realm experts and Yuanying realm experts. Reverend Chongxu knew very well that the other party had the advantage in numbers. If he could not defeat them after a long battle, they would definitely call for reinforcements. By then it would be difficult for him to escape. Therefore, he did not want to be entangled with the 2 of them any longer. With a flash, he disappeared into thin air from where he was standing. Chase. Seeing that Reverend Chongxu had run away, the 2 supreme beings of the holy sect did not seem surprised at all. After exchanging a glance with each other, the 2 of them tacitly chased after him. The 3 of them left just like that. Qin Xueqing waited for about half an hour. Then, she carefully drove Xingcha to the place where the 3 of them were fighting just now. The air was filled with the energy that was dispersed from the battle between the 3 of them. Qin Xueqing tried to sense it with her divine sense. However, she discovered that the energy was like a knife. Even if she only touched it slightly with her divine sense, the energy of the true origin would leave a shallow scar on her divine sense. This is Supreme Palace enclosure? Wonderful book house. Chapter 546. After witnessing a battle between supreme martial artists with her own eyes, Qin Wanqing immediately became much more cautious. Chen Shi did not lie to her. The danger of the Supreme Palace enclosure was far beyond her imagination. But even so, Qin Xueqing did not have the slightest intention of retreating. Instead, she felt an inexplicable sense of excitement. At that moment, she was like a university student who had just entered society. She was anxious and excited, determined to realize her life's dream in this unknown land. martial arts and cultivation. These were the ultimate goals that Qin Xueqing pursued in her life. If other people encountered such a terrifying scene, they would probably be so scared that their limbs would go numb, and they would be at a loss of what to do. But Qin Xueqing was different. This battle between supreme martial artists, which was rarely seen in 100 years, did not scare her. Instead, it made her yearn for the strength displayed by the three of them. She yearned for the ultimate realm that could overlook all living things. If it were not for Chen Shi, she might never know what kind of existence above the divinity stage was. And it was also because of Chen Shi's appearance that a door to a new world opened for her. The so-called divinity stage. In the eyes of supreme martial artists, what was the difference between them and ants? Qin Xueqing was not willing to be an ant for the rest of her life. So she ignored Chen Shi's persuasion and came to the Supreme Palace enclosure alone. In fact, to Qin Xueqing, the Supreme Palace enclosure was actually a good place where danger and opportunity coexisted. Just like Heavenly Spiral, where Chen Shi used to be. Although Chen Shi had experienced many difficulties and dangers in Heavenly Spiral, and was almost at the gates of hell, but it was undeniable that Chen Shi had also obtained an opportunity that ordinary people could not imagine. What Qin Xueqing wanted now was this kind of opportunity. The air was filled with violent true essence. Qin Xueqing quietly drove Xingcha to the center of the battlefield, trying to gain some insights from the battle traces left behind by the three. Unfortunately, her cultivation was too low, so she couldn't get any useful combat experience from it. Therefore, Qin Xueqing stayed here for about 2 hours before reluctantly leaving on Xingcha. The urgent matter at hand was to find out the exact situation of the Supreme Palace enclosure, so that he could plan his next move. Thus, Qin Xueqing continuously circled in the air, and spent an entire month observing the movements on the ground. It was during this time that Qin Xueqing discovered a very strange phenomenon. The boundary of the Supreme Palace enclosure was filled with a strange grayish-white fog. Once she steered Xingcha into it, the gray fog would instantly cover her vision. Even her spiritual sense would not be able to sense the things around her. Qin Xueqing keenly sensed a trace of danger, so she decisively retreated. This time, she finally realized the seriousness of the problem. Qin Xueqing didn't pay attention to the changes in the Supreme Palace enclosure before, but after discovering the strangeness of the gray fog, she began to face this problem seriously. Wasn't this gray fog the white mold she saw in space? Except for the area where the Supreme Palace enclosure was located, the sky above the Heavenly Market enclosure and the Purple Myrtle enclosure were covered with a thick layer of white mold. The current Supreme Palace enclosure. No, it should be called 3 enclosures. At this moment, 3 enclosures was like a deformed potato covered with white mold. It was very different from the true essence projection provided by Chen Shi. It was obvious. Something must have happened to the Supreme Palace enclosure, so it became like this today. As a member of the Wu Lian Secret Service who had experienced hundreds of battles, Qin Xueqing certainly couldn't be as big-breasted and brainless as Chen Shi imagined. She just had a cold personality and had always been too lazy to talk too much nonsense with people. Therefore, after discovering the strangeness of the gray fog, Qin Xueqing immediately steered Xingcha into space again, and tried to enter the Heavenly Market enclosure and the Purple Myrtle enclosure from space. However, what Qin Xueqing didn't expect was that, no matter how hard she tried, as long as Xingcha got close to the gray fog would instantly block her vision. There was clearly a gray fog above the Supreme Palace enclosure. But why didn't the gray fog above the Supreme Palace enclosure have any effect on her? Qin Xueqing thought seriously for a long time, but in the end, she couldn't figure out the reason. Obviously, the unknown represented danger. But she wasn't willing to back down like this. So after thinking about it, Qin Xueqing finally decided to find Cheng Hua and Yiji first, and then learn the reason from them. Therefore, Qin Xueqing temporarily put aside the doubts in her heart, turned to steer Xingcha through the gray fog, and came to the Supreme Palace enclosure again. After more than a month of investigation, Qin Xueqing had already memorized the geographical features of the Supreme Palace enclosure, so she soon came to the northern part of Ningzhou. At this point, Qin Xueqing found another problem. Based on her first impression when she came to the Supreme Palace enclosure, the Supreme Palace enclosure should have experienced a protracted war, and the situation was very fierce. The scope of the war was so wide that it was simply shocking. But, after more than a month of observation, Qin Xueqing found that there were no forces fighting with each other, except for the group of Taoist Master Void Pierce that she met when she first came to the Supreme Palace enclosure. The entire Supreme Palace enclosure seemed to be in the stage of post-war recuperation. Although her eyes were full of ruins after the war, there were no more rumbling explosions between heaven and earth. There were only large areas of ruins, and a kind of indescribable silence. For example, the residents of the small village she just passed by were all cultivators, but the highest cultivation level among them should be around the foundation establishment stage. Because of the war, more than half of the buildings in the village unfortunately collapsed. What was slightly strange was that the villagers who were lucky enough to survive didn't immediately start the post-war reconstruction work. Instead, they all gathered in an open space in the center of the village. The villagers sat on the ground, surrounded by familiar faces, but no one opened their mouth to break the silence. The entire village seemed to be shrouded in a kind of emotion. The name of this emotion was despair. Qin Xueqing didn't rashly approach the village, because this kind of small place was sparsely populated, and the neighbors knew each other. It was obviously impossible for an outsider like her to smoothly blend in. Therefore, when she came to a gathering place with more people, Qin Xueqing carefully piloted Xingcha and descended from the sky. This was also the first time she set foot on the ground. As the saying goes, heroes emerge in troubled times. Now that the Supreme Palace enclosure was in the midst of a war, wasn't it a great opportunity for her to show her skills? Therefore, Qin Xueqing changed into a set of clothes that she stole from somewhere, and followed the continuous flow of people directly into this slightly dilapidated city. Didn't Chenghua and Yiji come from the three great aristocratic families? Presumably, she should be able to inquire about the two of them here, right? Qin Wanqing couldn't help but be optimistic. Come. Wonderful book house. Come. Chapter 547. Due to the different social structure, there was a big difference in the way of life between cultivators and ordinary people. The most obvious point was, most cultivators in the Supreme Palace enclosure didn't like to live in groups. It was also because of this that there were no large cities in the history of the Supreme Palace enclosure. At most, there were only some large family strongholds or markets. This situation was actually in line with the development of the population. After all, cultivation required the consumption of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Once people gathered together, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth would naturally not be enough to share. Therefore, except for some fledglings with lower cultivation, cultivators above the golden core stage would mostly stay away from the city and open up their own cave abodes in more remote places. Qin Xueqing entered a small city controlled by the Xianyuan family. The original intention of the Xianyuan family to build this city was mainly to protect their bloodline and provide a relatively safe environment for the clan members with lower cultivation to grow. If it was in the past, there wouldn't be too many people in the city. Unfortunately, today was different from the past. As the three enclosures converged, the saint from the Z-Way enclosure suddenly appeared from the gray fog and attacked the Jade Clear Grotto heaven. An unprecedented large-scale war began. The 9 prefectures of the Supreme Palace enclosure were attacked by the saint almost simultaneously. With Ning Prefecture as an example, the Xianyuan, Dongfang, and Tuoba families, who were known as the 3 major families of Ning Prefecture, naturally became the focus of the saint's attention. The slightly different part of the war with the people on Earth was because high-level immortal cultivators had absolute dominance over low-level immortal cultivators. The Holy Church didn't care about immortal cultivators below the nascent soul stage. Instead, they focused all their attention on the 3 family heads and the elders of the various families. As long as the 3 family heads and elders were subdued, Ning Prefecture would naturally be under the saint's command. Therefore, adhering to the battle philosophy of capturing the leader first to capture the bandits, the saint's 12 kings automatically divided into 10 groups as soon as they walked out of the gray fog. The 3 strongest kings faced the 4 perfected masters of the Jade Clear Grotto heaven, while the other 9 kings attacked the strongest forces that ruled the 9 prefectures respectively. The saint came to the Supreme Palace enclosure with the mentality of colonists. However, when the 4 sages heard that someone could actually pass through the gray fog and come directly from the purple myrtle enclosure to the Supreme Palace enclosure, not only were they not wary of this, they even stood from the perspective of the hosts and warmly entertained the 12 kings, which almost led to a disaster. At the wine table, all of a sudden, the 3 reverend kings attacked, severely wounding Reverend Cavern Spirit, the weakest of the 4 reverends. Even though Taoist Master Void Pierce stage reacted in time, he could not stop the other party from coming prepared. Therefore, he instantly fell into a disadvantageous position. Why were the 4 spiritual masters so afraid of Chunxi? It wasn't because Chunxi was much stronger than them, but because Chunxi had threatened them with the 10,000-year inheritance of the Jade Clear Grotto Heaven. Either hand over Yuhuan Tianzuan, or face Chunxi's endless sneak attacks and harassment. Although the 4 spiritual masters were strong, they had countless weak successors behind them that needed to be protected. This was also the real reason why the 4 sage masters had chosen to compromise. Chunxi alone could intimidate the 4 spiritual masters. Furthermore, the Saint sect had specially sent 3 reverend kings to deal with the Jade Clear Grotto Heaven. Perhaps it was because they were worried that the Jade Clear Grotto Heaven held absolute authority in the Supreme Palace enclosure, so the Saint sect had never planned to leave the Jade Clear Grotto Heaven behind. Therefore, the 3 reverend kings fought a huge battle with the 4 spiritual masters in the Jade Clear Grotto Heaven. As a result, the 10,000-year inheritance of the Jade Clear Grotto Heaven was destroyed. The flames of war started and soon engulfed the 9 states of the Supreme Palace enclosure. During this period of more than 2 years, the drama of conquest and resistance continued to play out. However, the 12 reverend kings were all supreme being existences. Even if the major forces launched a counterattack under the leadership of the 4 spiritual masters in time, the result was futile. The flames of war burned more and more fiercely, and the major forces also suffered more and more losses. After the Tuoba family of Ning State took the lead to submit to the Saint sect and received preferential treatment, the major forces also turned their guns and turned to kill their former comrades. The Saint sect only wanted to unify the Supreme Palace enclosure, not kill them all. Since that was the case, why couldn't they submit to the Saint sect? Anyway, weren't they under the control of the Jade Clear Grotto Heaven previously? Now that they just changed bosses, why couldn't they accept it? Based on this thought, more and more forces chose to submit to the Saint sect, and the 4 spiritual masters became stray dogs. The battle that Qin Xueqing saw when she first came to the Supreme Palace enclosure was the Saint sect's follow-up operation to capture the 4 spiritual masters. The overall situation was set. Although there were still sporadic resistance forces in the 9 states, they couldn't stop the Saint sect's plan to unify the Supreme Palace enclosure. Qin Xueqing came to the Supreme Palace enclosure under such circumstances. After disguising herself, Qin Xueqing hid in the city. She had spent a great deal of effort to gather this information without attracting anyone's attention. Now that the world was too chaotic, one might suddenly be affected by the flames of war if one stayed in the wilderness to cultivate. So many immortal cultivators came to the city to take refuge. These people didn't have high cultivation, but they were very well informed. While chatting with these people, Qin Xueqing found out another very important piece of information. That was Cheng Hua and Yi Ji went to the Great Illusionary Land and hadn't returned yet. It had been 2 years. According to past experience, the convergence of the 3 enclosures generally only lasted for a month. Once the thick fog dissipated and the 3 enclosures separated, the Great Illusionary Land would be completely closed. Even if someone wanted to stay inside, they would be forcibly expelled at this time. Of course, these secrets weren't known to the public before. It was because of the arrival of the Saint sect that these secrets were made public. Jade Clear Grotto Heaven needed to be mentioned here. The reason why the 4 spiritual masters treated the 12 kings as allies was that the 3 enclosures couldn't be connected at all. It had been mentioned before. Once the 3 enclosures converged, the fluctuation of spirit energy would become abnormally intense, and the fog formed by spirit energy would gradually cover the entire sky. Qin Shihuiqing had personally experienced the strangeness of the fog before. So no matter how high one's cultivation was, it was absolutely impossible to pass through the fog to go to the Purple Myrtle enclosure and the Heavenly Market enclosure. Yiji's previous instigation of Cheng Hua to escape to the Heavenly Market enclosure was actually just a joke. Didn't you see? Since ancient times, apart from the Saint sect, who else could freely travel between the two realms? The 4 spiritual masters mistakenly thought that the 12 kings came to the Supreme Palace enclosure in the form of avatars, so they held a big banquet in the Jade Clear Grotto Heaven to entertain these friends, who came from afar. It had to be said. The way the 4 spiritual masters entertained the 12 kings was really like the way the Native Americans first met the European colonists. Note: this might be a bit tiring to read because I'm also tired of writing. But these contents can't be skipped, so I can only try to reduce the length as much as possible. The reason why I suddenly mentioned this. That's because this book had already entered the final stage of completion. Throughout the whole process, I learned a lot from it and also discovered my shortcomings. This is my first million-word work. If I say I'm satisfied, then I'm definitely not satisfied. After all, it's a work full of flaws. It's really not good enough, nor is it exciting enough. At least, it's not exciting throughout. Because many of the mistakes are too low level. If I were to rewrite it, the level of excitement would definitely increase by several levels. But if I'm not satisfied, what it has achieved now is actually far beyond what I once expected. So I'm really grateful to all of you for giving me such an opportunity to learn and improve. I won't say much nonsense. Because this is a VIP chapter, you have to pay for it. I'm writing it here so that the pirated readers can also read it. Maybe one day they will also become genuine readers and support me. 200 words for 1 center. This paragraph has a total of 500 words. I'm taking advantage of your 2 cents. I hope you won't criticize me too harshly. The new book has been confirmed. If nothing goes wrong, the title of the book will be I Really Know Martial Arts. Currently, the title has been registered, but it hasn't been officially released yet. Because I have to save 100,000 words before I release it, I can't keep updating it. When the new book is released, I will open a chapter to explain. So before that, please don't take this book off the shelves in addition. I will also do my best to finish this book properly. Come. Wonderful book house. Chapter 548. The arrival of the Holy Church had also indirectly caused the secret of the Great Illusionary Land to be deliberately publicized by some people. From this, Qin Shihuiqing finally understood why Cheng Hua and Yiji had not returned to Earth. It was not that they did not want to come back, but that they had no way to come back. Thinking back, when the secret of the Great Illusionary Land had just been leaked, many people rushed to the Great Illusionary Land with the mentality of giving it a try. Everyone wanted to obtain opportunities and adventures from it, so they did not care about the quota limit. In short, whether the rumors were true or false, they had to try it first. There was no chance before, but now that the opportunity was in front of them, who could resist the temptation? The result was naturally overjoyed. The limit of 3,000 places seemed to have been lifted, so whether it was Jindan or Yuanying, as long as they dared to go, they would definitely be able to enter the Great Illusionary Land smoothly. The sudden surprise also caused the people to lose their rationality. During that time, the battle at the Supreme Palace enclosure was the most intense. The 4 spiritual masters and the 12 kings were fighting fiercely, and the major forces of the 9 regions were also busy resisting the attack of the Holy Church. It was obviously impossible to be distracted and care about other people in a battle of life and death at the supreme level. Instead of staying in the Supreme Palace enclosure and praying that the flames of war would not burn their heads, it was better to risk their lives and go to the Great Illusionary Land. If they really got lucky and luckily obtained some adventure, wouldn't they be able to completely reach the peak of life? With such a fantasy, for a time, there were as many cultivators going to the Great Illusionary Land as carps crossing the river. But as more and more people entered the Great Illusionary Land, no one came back. People finally realized where the problem was. Could it be, this place could only be entered and not exited? After a series of suicidal repeated confirmations, The great illusionary land had completely become a forbidden area in people's minds. As long as no one left alive, no one would dare to break in again. So according to the current situation, Qin Shihuiqing should never see Changhua and Yiji again. Unless she personally made a trip to the great illusionary realm, she wouldn't even be able to determine whether the two of them were dead or alive. And since she couldn't find Changhua and Yiji, what reason did Qin Shihuiqing have to continue staying in this war-torn and turbulent Supreme Palace enclosure? At that moment, Qin Shihuiqing couldn't help but hesitate. She even had the urge to immediately return to Earth. But soon Qin Shihuiqing's pursuit of martial arts calmed her down once again. If she wanted to concentrate on cultivating in seclusion, why would she bother to come all the way to the Supreme Palace enclosure? Wasn't the turbulent Supreme Palace enclosure a great stage for her to train herself? Therefore, after adjusting her mentality, Qin Shihuiqing temporarily settled down in the Supreme Palace enclosure. The Supreme Palace enclosure was a very big stage. Now she was just a small behind-the-scenes worker. Therefore, Qin Shihuiqing couldn't help but look forward to the day when she would also step onto the stage. Since her sister-in-law had settled down in the Supreme Palace enclosure, let's talk about Nian first. Important things had to be said 3 times. Although Nian was only 9 years old now, she was already in the 6th grade. What did it mean to be in the 6th grade? The capital-affiliated primary school didn't have a middle school department, which meant that the children in the 6th grade could do whatever they wanted on campus. Moreover, on the first day of school, the homeroom teacher directly appointed Nian to be the class monitor of the 6th grade class 2. The teacher made this arrangement partly to take care of this little girl who had skipped 2 grades. On the other hand, it was entirely because of the good reputation she had built up in the capital-affiliated primary school over the years. Any teacher who had taught Nian would be full of praise for this smart, sensible, and clever child. Therefore, the homeroom teacher had a reason not to let Nian be the class monitor. Okay, Chen Nian will be our class monitor from now on. She skipped 2 grades in the past, and is younger than all of you, so you must not bully her in the future. If I find out that anyone dares to bully her, I'm sure all of you know the consequences. The homeroom teacher of the 6th grade class 2 was a middle-aged man, so he wasn't as gentle as the other teachers. Instead, he pretended to be fierce and gave the class a warning. Remember this. In terms of life, Chen Nian is your little sister. But in terms of studies, you must learn from her. Although she skipped 2 grades, she still scored 100% on the pretest. But what about all of you? Okay, I won't say anything more. Everyone be alert and let's start class now. On the podium, the homeroom teacher lectured with spittle flying everywhere. Then he patted Nian's shoulder and squeezed out a smile. Chen Nian, you're small, so you'll sit here in the future. The teacher pointed to the seat closest to the podium. Then Nian carried her school bag and obediently came to this excellent place with good feng shui. It was a little strange. Nian was short, so it was reasonable for her to sit in the first row. But her desk mate was not only taller than her, she was also much bigger. Sitting there, she was like a pagoda that could suppress demons. She could practically block the view of the students behind her. Moreover, she was a girl. A fat girl who weighed at least 150 pounds. Suddenly meeting such an outstanding classmate, Nian couldn't help but take a second look at her. But she didn't expect this fat girl to treat her as if she didn't exist. Even though the whole class was paying attention to Nian, the fat girl still shrugged her head and turned a deaf ear to everything around her. Soon Nian's first class in the 6th grade class ended. As a new classmate, Nian felt that she had an obligation to take the initiative to integrate into the group. So she took the initiative to greet the fat girl next to her across the aisle. Hello, I'm Chen Nian. What's your name? Nian had skipped 2 grades, so she already had experience. So, her adaptability could be said to be very strong. She didn't feel shy at all. Who would have thought? Nian wasn't afraid of strangers, but the fat girl next to her was. She just patted the girl's arm out of courtesy, but she didn't expect the girl to be so scared that she started trembling. Nian's face was full of black question marks. She thought that she had accidentally scared the girl. But before she could apologize, The fat girl directly covered her head with her hands, and then leaned over the table like an ostrich. The classmate behind Nian Nian also saw this scene. So this boy who looked like a skinny monkey immediately pointed at the fat girl in front of him and laughed loudly. Chen Yan, ignore her. She's a fool. Ha ha ha, fool, big fool. Ha 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 ha. Come. Wonderful book house. Chapter 549. Today was the first day of school after all. Except for Nian Nian, everyone in the class was old acquaintances. Therefore, after a summer break, everyone naturally had endless topics to talk about with each other. Perhaps wanting to attract everyone's attention, this skinny monkey-like boy saw the interaction between Nian Nian and the chubby girl and deliberately laughed loudly. And such a pretentious laugh naturally attracted the attention of the other students in an instant. All of a sudden, Nian Nian's position became the focus of the entire class. Yo, isn't this the big idiot in our class? I haven't seen you for a few months. Why are you still so fat? Didn't your mother tell you to lose weight? Ha 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 ha. Unlike Nian Nian who skipped 2 grades, most children who studied to the 6th grade were concentrated at the age of 11 or 12, which was basically half a teenager. In addition, children nowadays were very precocious, so they naturally knew more than the children of Chen Xi's generation. Of course, being precocious didn't mean being sensible. It was precisely because of this that introverted children were more introverted, and extroverted children were more extroverted. When toys and cartoons were no longer their only pursuit, teasing and ridiculing their classmates became a way for them to relax. Put yourself in their shoes? Put yourself in their shoes and think for others? Sorry, children at the age of 11 or 12 didn't understand this slightly complicated theory. Just like a joke that was once popular on the internet. A reporter went to the South Pole to interview a group of penguins. He asked the first penguin, "What do you do every day?" The penguin replied, "Eat, sleep, play with Dowdo." Then he asked the second penguin. The penguin still replied, "Eat, sleep, play with Dowdo." The reporter asked the other penguins with confusion, but the result was the same in the end. So, the reporter continued to ask 99 penguins like this. When the reporter asked the 100th little penguin, the little penguin gave a different answer. "Eat, sleep." The reporter asked in surprise, "Why don't you play with Dowdo?" The little penguin pouted, glared at the reporter, and replied, "I am Dowdo." Was this really a joke? No, no, no. In fact, it was a complete tragedy. Because behind the 99 happiness, there was always a hidden pain that had no place to complain. The fat girl's name was Li Tangyue. This was a poetic name, but unfortunately, it did not match her appearance at all. Li Tangyue was 12 years old this year. She was 1.6 meters tall, but her weight was an astonishing 150 kilograms. When she stood there, she was like a big bucket. Unfortunately, she was diagnosed with childhood non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, also known as severe fatty liver disease. This kind of disease was not fatal, and could be eliminated by recuperation. Therefore, after some treatment, Li Tangyue's parents let the child go back to school. And this was the beginning of Li Tangyue's tragedy. She used to be a lively and cute little girl. However, as her body grew fatter, Li Tangyue gradually became silent and her grades began to plummet. Although the head teacher of the 6th grade class 2 was a male teacher, he still noticed the change in Li Tangyue's mentality. Therefore, in order to encourage and help the child, the teacher moved Li Tangyue to the first row so that she could be urged to study hard at any time. Her teacher's intentions were good. But this arrangement directly led Li Tangyue to walk from behind the scenes to the front of the stage, as if there was a spotlight on her at all times. From the day she moved to the first row, Li Tangyue felt that dozens of pairs of eyes were following behind her at all times. Her classmates were all looking at her. Her classmates were all laughing at her. She was afraid that her broad body would block the line of sight of the students in the back row. So she always bent her waist and hunched her back, trying her best to shrink her head. She never dared to go to the toilet, because she was afraid of the strange gazes from both sides of the corridor. She tried hard to hide herself, but the spotlight on her became more and more dazzling. She was different from Nian Nian, who was a white swan that everyone loved. She was born an ugly duckling that no one liked. In order to lose weight, Li Tangyue tried to go on a hunger strike. But, even if she was so hungry that she was about to faint, her weight did not decrease at all. Instead, it increased a little. Because she was fat, she suffered a huge psychological pressure that she should not have to endure at her age. For those students with obvious physical disabilities, it was precisely because of their obvious physical defects that they were not easy to bully and ridicule. Because their weakness was reflected on the surface. Even children knew that they could not bully the disabled, let alone these 11 or 12-year-old teenagers. Li Tangyue was different. She did not have any obvious disabilities. She was just plain fat. Therefore, mocking her for being fat had gradually become a custom in grade 6, class 2. Regardless of whether they were boys or girls, regardless of their conduct, regardless of whether their grades were good or bad, in short, everyone was disgusted and disliked this fat girl who was like a bucket. Almost every class had children who were ostracized. But children like Li Tangyue, who were both ostracized by others and ostracized by themselves at the same time, were very few. How could the pressure and pain she was enduring in her heart be understood by ordinary people? Hearing the words big fool constantly ringing in her ears, Nian suddenly woke up from her shock. Why did everyone call Li Tangyue a big fool and not a big fatty? Wasn't it because she was stupid? When she was mocked by others, she would only bury her head deep in her arms like an ostrich. Just like what Nian saw now. Looking at the new desk mate in front of her who was as fat as a pig but as timid as a mouse, Nian suddenly stood up and let out the angriest roar in her life to the entire class. Enough! All of you shut up. Shut up. Although Nian was young, her petite figure stood there, but it was as if she was a stabilizing force. In an instant, the entire class fell silent. At that moment, everyone did not understand what kind of madness she had. Perhaps it was because they were suppressed by Nian's aura. Or perhaps it was because she had the support of the head teacher. In short, after everyone saw Nian's angry face, they decisively shut their mouths. No one stood up to continue to challenge the authority of the new class leader. Seeing that everyone was quiet, Nian took a deep breath, turned around, and shouted to the class, "I announce! From today onwards, you are not allowed to call her a big fool anymore. And you are not allowed to bully her anymore. If I find out that anyone is still bullying her, then I will definitely tell the teacher and the principal. Come. Wonderful book house. Come." Chapter 550. Her announcement shocked the entire class. Everyone seemed to be unable to understand the reason behind Nian's anger, but after seeing her serious expression, no one dared to stand up and oppose her. Skinny Monkey was sitting behind Nian. He opened his mouth to speak, but in the end he swallowed the ridicule that was about to come out. After all, a 6th grader was not young anymore. Everyone had their own thoughts. Although Nian had attacked everyone in the class, this method of not specifically targeting a particular person would not cause everyone to be angry. Otherwise, it would be impossible for everyone to attack her. Nian had just joined the class, so everyone was still unsure of her personality, so it was impossible for them to get into a conflict with her over such a small matter. Therefore, after a short period of silence, the classroom immediately returned to its usual clamor. Everyone ignored Nian. Those who were fooling around continued to fool around, and those who were chatting continued to chat as if the unpleasant incident had never happened. Although Li Tangyue did not raise her head, she could hear the movements around her. Seeing that everyone was no longer ridiculing her, Li Tangyue carefully raised her head to observe her surroundings. Nian saw her actions, so she smiled at her and then sat back down in her seat as if no one was around. "Thank you." Looking at Nian's calm appearance, Li Tangyue hesitated for a moment before carefully thanking her. "It's okay. If anyone dares to bully you in the future, just tell me. I'll make the decision for you." Perhaps because she had done a good deed, Nian was in a good mood, so she did not care about the strange gazes around her, and directly patted her chest to accept this little brother. Soon the break between classes was over. The second class began. Nian secretly observed Li Tangyue for a while. Only then did she realize that she liked to deliberately bend her body in class, as if she was afraid that she would block the view of the students behind her. Therefore, as soon as the class ended, Nian went straight to the form teacher's office and told her thoughts. She hoped that the teacher could move Li Tangyue to the window so that Li Tangyue would not block the other students. At the same time, she also hoped that the teacher would let her sit behind Li Tangyue. This way, she could protect Li Tangyue at any time and prevent her from being ostracized by her classmates. The teacher decisively agreed to her request. And this was the privilege that Nian had as a merit student, the leader of the young pioneers, and the class monitor of Year 6 Class 2. It had to be said that Nian really did things swiftly and decisively. After receiving the teacher's warning, she took advantage of the break between classes to quickly complete a series of seat changes. At this point, Nian and Li Tangyue had become the unshakable front and back seats. And it was precisely because of Nian's appearance that Li Tangyue's gloomy primary school life finally ushered in a ray of light. After school in the afternoon, Nian told Chen Shi all the good things she had done today. Although Chen Shi already knew what had happened, he still pretended to be very surprised and then praised the little girl. Although Nian always had the attitude of a class monitor in school, in front of Chen Shi, she would always be that little girl who never grew up. Therefore, after hearing Chen Shi's praise, the little girl immediately showed a proud look and walked with a bouncing and jumping nonstop. The father and daughter walked leisurely for a while. At this time, Nian seemed to have thought of something and suddenly turned to Chen Shi and said, "Dad, we won't do the exercises between classes in the future, and we won't have PE class either." And why? Didn't the Ministry of Education stipulate that schools must have PE class? Hearing this, the little girl's face was filled with excitement and said, "We'll change to martial arts. In the future, we'll practice Arhut Fist during the exercises between classes, and PE class will also be changed to martial arts class." This was important news that the teacher announced before school ended, so that the children would remember to tell their parents at home. Practice Arhut Fist during the exercises between classes? Changing PE class to martial arts class? So fast. The moment he heard this news, Chen Shi couldn't help but frown slightly. He remembered Grandpa Deng once said, the popularization of computers had to start from a child's age. 30 years had passed in the blink of an eye. Computers had long been popularized, and now it was martial arts' turn? Martial arts had the function of strengthening the body, so using Arhut Fist to replace the exercises between classes seemed to be a very normal operation. After all, this was only a set of beginner-level fist techniques. Could it be that they really expected the children to rely on this set of Arhut Fist to practice obvious strength? Practicing martial arts was so hard. If they didn't slack off and cheat, the teacher should thank the heavens. However, everything had to be thought deeply. This seemed to be a simple move to cater to the current trend, but there was a deeper meaning behind it. If Chen Shi guessed correctly, once the Arhut Fist entered the school and officially entered the stage of popularization, the Wu Alliance would then select the most talented and outstanding children and send them to a newly established national exemplary school. A special school that only taught cultivation and nothing else. Chen Shi was slightly lost in thought. The little girl waited for a while. Seeing that Chen Shi didn't respond, she couldn't help but pout, then grabbed Chen Shi's arm and said with an aggrieved face, "Dad, you said before that you would let me learn martial arts. In the end, you didn't let me go to the training class. Are you going back on your word?" After hearing Nian's words, Chen Shi's face suddenly showed an expression of not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Could it be that this child had been thinking about this all along? As mentioned before, Chen Shi did teach the little girl how to cultivate qi, but he still didn't teach the little girl how to use the vital essence in her body. Nian was very sensible, so when she mentioned it to Chen Shi before, she never mentioned it again after Chen Shi changed the topic. And the reason why she brought it up again today was because this matter had indeed been hidden in her heart for a long time. Many students in the class signed up for the martial arts training class, but she didn't. Although she could ride a horse, skate, swim, and draw, but now the most popular thing was martial arts. Did they think she didn't have vanity? Unknowingly, Nian had already developed the habit of doing the best in everything and fighting for the first place in everything. But it was a pity. Dad still refused to teach her martial arts, and didn't agree to let her go to the martial arts training class. Seeing the little girl's aggrieved face, Chun-Shi hesitated for a moment, then smiled and pinched her little face, asking, "What's wrong? Are you angry with Dad?" "I'm not." Hearing Chun-Shi say this, the little girl suddenly turned her head to the side, pouted her mouth and pretended to be angry. Why was Chun-Shi unwilling to teach her martial arts? Wasn't it because he was afraid that she would accidentally kill a classmate? But thinking about it carefully, with Nian-Nian's current intelligence, she shouldn't make such a low-level mistake, right? Thinking of this, Chun-Shi smiled and hugged her, then said with a gentle face, Okay, my precious baby. Don't be angry, okay? Dad will teach you, okay?" Hearing Chun-Shi say this, Nian-Nian's eyes suddenly lit up. "Really? Of course, more real than real gold. Then I want to learn martial arts that are more powerful than the Arhut fist." "Oh, do you know what martial arts are more powerful than the Arhut fist?" Chun-Shi smiled and asked in return. He didn't expect Nian-Nian's next answer to not know whether to laugh or cry. "Everyone says the Nine-Yang Divine Technique is powerful. I also want to learn the Nine-Yang Divine Technique. Dad, can you teach me the Nine-Yang Divine Technique?" Chapter 551. Nine-Yang Divine Art? Chun-Shi didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he heard the little girl's words. Let's not talk about whether Chun-Shi knew the Nine-Yang Divine Art or not. Even if he followed the original text and forcefully derived a technique similar to the Nine-Yang Divine Art, this technique was obviously not something Nian-Nian could practice. After all, how could a girl practice the Nine-Yang Divine Art? If she wanted to practice it, she should practice the Nine-Yin Sutra. No wonder the little girl didn't forget Nian-Nian's Nine-Yang Divine Art. With the rise of martial arts craze, Wuxia dramas naturally regained their vitality. Classics such as the Condor Shooters trilogy and The Smiling, Proud Wanderer were replayed on TV over and over again every day. Although Nian-Nian was a girl, didn't she often use the 18 dragons subduing palms and 9 solitary swords when she played with Wen and Ming? When he saw his daughter foolishly shouting out the 18 dragons subduing palms, Chun-Shi didn't think much of it. He only thought that the child had grown up, so her interests and hobbies had changed. Now that he thought about it, Chun-Shi realized that he took it for granted. The reason was that the seed of cultivation had already been planted in the little girl's heart. And now, it was time for this seed to break through the soil and sprout. "You silly child, the Nine-Yang Divine Art is only passed to males and not females. Didn't you listen to the lines carefully when you were watching TV? If a girl practices the Nine-Yang Divine Art, she will grow a lot of facial hair like a man. So even if Daddy really knows this technique, there's no way I can teach it to you." After hearing the little girl's request, Chun-Shi smiled and rubbed her head. Hearing this, the little girl suddenly pouted with slight disappointment. "I can't learn the Nine-Yang Divine Art. I'm so angry. VV. Then I want to learn the muscle bone strengthening scripture. I don't know how. Wave like subtle steps? I don't know how either. Star absorbing technique? Daddy. Then what do you know?" In the end, the little girl's face was already full of unhappiness. Because in her heart, her father was an omnipotent Superman, but now he said that he couldn't do anything. Therefore, in Nian-Nian's eyes, this was clearly Chun-Shi's excuse for not wanting to teach her martial arts. Just now, he had clearly said that he would teach her a martial art that was more powerful than the Arhut fist, but in the blink of an eye, he had started to change the topic and started to laugh. How could she be happy? Humph, Daddy is the most shameless. Thinking of this, Nian-Nian no longer paid attention to Chun-Shi. Carrying her backpack, she angrily strode forward, clearly wanting to distance herself from Chun-Shi. Yo, who made our family's darling angry again? It was rare to see Nian-Nian throw a tantrum. Although Chun-Shi found it funny, he didn't dare to continue teasing her. If he really made the child cry, then it would be his turn as the father to be put in an awkward position. Thinking of this, Chun-Shi immediately went forward and directly carried the angry little guy in a princess carry, forcibly hugging him in her arms. Under the sudden attack, Nian-Nian instinctively cried out. But very quickly, she quietly laid in Chun-Shi's arms, her head lowered, not saying a word. Seeing this, Chunxi tried to throw her into the air to scare her. Unexpectedly, this girl pouted and didn't react at all, as if she was sure that Chunxi wouldn't dare to let go of her. Looking at this, Nian was really angry this time. Therefore, Chunxi immediately kept the smile on his face and said to her sincerely, Nian, don't be angry. Come. Daddy will let you ride the horse, okay? No. Why not? Daddy is shameless. I don't like Daddy anymore. Chunxi carried Nian and walked quickly on the sidewalk. The father and daughter bickered and whispered to each other, as if there was no one around. It was obvious that Nian was pretending to be angry. In fact, how could she bear to be angry with her father? It was said that a daughter was her father's lover in his previous life. When Chunxi saw the envious gazes of the passers-by, he suddenly realized he hadn't carried Nian in a long time. Speaking of which, it was strange. He didn't know when it started, but Nian didn't like to be carried by Chunxi as they walked. Perhaps it was because she had grown up, so she didn't want to be carried in her parents' arms all the time like when she was young. Okay, Daddy will sincerely apologize to you now. I said before that I would teach you martial arts, but I still haven't taught you after so long. It's all Daddy's fault. Don't be angry with Daddy, okay? After Chunxi comforted her with kind words, Nian finally stopped pouting. After hearing her snort, she used her big eyes to stare at Chunxi, as if hinting that Chunxi should show enough sincerity first, then she would consider whether to forgive this shameless daddy. 2 years ago, it was Qin Xueqing who fought for the right to choose for her. 2 years later, it was her who fought for the right to choose for herself. Okay, I won't tease you anymore. Since you want to learn so much, Daddy will teach you everything I know. However, cultivation has to be done step by step. How about this? Grandpa has a set of martial arts called Qin's Cloud Hands. Not only Aunt knows it, even Mommy knows it. Daddy will teach you this first, okay? Qin's Cloud Hands? Nian lay in Chunxi's arms, wrinkling her nose as she repeated this word. Then, with a face full of suspicion, she asked, Is Qin's Cloud Hands more powerful than Arhut Fist? Of course. Look at how powerful Aunt is. Doesn't she also practice this martial art? Okay, then I'll learn this. Let's go. Daddy will teach you this supreme martial art. Daddy believes. The day you complete your studies will be the day you become famous throughout the world. Time flew. Soon, another month had passed. During this time, Nian spent the rest of her time diligently learning Qin's Cloud Hands. Other than going to school as usual. This time, Chunxi took out something that could really fight. It was different from the Qi refinement method from before. Speaking of which, learning martial arts was really hard work, at least 10,000 times harder than quietly meditating and refining Qi. But the strange thing was, not only did Nian not feel that it was hard, but she also enjoyed it every day. If it wasn't for the agreement between father and daughter that she couldn't secretly practice at school, she would have already mastered the entire set of Qin's Cloud Hands. Seeing Nian working so hard, Chunxi was gratified, but he couldn't help but worry. In terms of cultivation, this child wasn't as free and undisciplined as him, nor was she as carefree as her mother. Instead, she was like Qin Xueqing, obsessed and fanatical? Could it be, Nian would also be a martial arts maniac in the future? When he thought of Qin Xueqing's behavior that no man liked, there was only one thought left in Chunxi's mind. Chapter 552. In this crisp autumn September, we welcome the autumn sunshine and the season of harvest, welcoming the cheerful and exciting school sports meet. Early in the morning, all the teachers and students of the school came to the sports field. Under the guidance of the teachers, some of the students arranged the venue, some of them tidied up their clothes, and some of them set up the sports equipment. Everyone was extremely busy, causing the originally quiet sports field to suddenly become lively. As the principal announced the start of the sports meet, the capital-affiliated primary school also officially ushered in the new autumn sports meet. Ah look! The moment the passionate athletes' marching song sounded, one class after another lined up neatly and strode toward the rostrum. They were all wearing bright clothes with smiles on their faces. They were full of vitality as they strode with their heads held high. They exuded the unique vitality of youth. On this day, October 15th, the National Day holiday had just ended. A few days after the children returned to school, the school officially announced the date of the autumn sports meet. Was there going to be a sports meet again? For the children, the sports meet was as important as Children's Day. This also meant that the children who had just finished the National Day holiday could play freely for 3 days. How could the children not be excited? As a famous key primary school in the country, once the autumn sports meet was held, the TV station would immediately send reporters to interview the students. At the same time, the district leaders would also lead a team to participate in the opening ceremony of the sports meet. Although the reporters and district leaders only showed their faces and left, to the students of the school, being able to show their faces on TV was obviously a very glorious and important matter. So how could they show their faces in front of the leaders? The simplest way was to be the host of the opening ceremony of the sports meet. In addition to taking on the role of announcing the opening ceremony, the host also had to stand on the rostrum and make a declaration of sportsmanship. Therefore, the popularity of this position was even higher than that of the captain of the young pioneers. Nian was now the big sister of the 6th grade. Previously, due to her lack of qualifications, she had not been able to take on such a good job. Now that she finally had enough experience, the moment she took on this beautiful task, Nian wrote a 1,500-word opening speech. Then, she read it in a cadence in front of all the teachers and students. She was not afraid at all, because she knew her father would definitely be on time in front of the TV and watch her shine on stage. I declare, this year's autumn sports meet of the Capital Affiliated Primary School. Now, let's begin. Following Nian's command, the field suddenly burst into an earth-shattering cheer. Seeing all the teachers and students in the school fall into a state of almost fanatical excitement, Nian couldn't help but have a sweet smile on her face. She really liked this kind of lively feeling. Unfortunately, the announcer and host didn't have to participate in the competition, so she couldn't show off her skills on the stage. Although it was just a small primary school sports meet, under the arrangement of the teachers, this year's autumn sports meet was held decently, regardless of whether it was the field competition, track competition, or fun competition. Other than the more competitive individual events, the teachers did not forget to arrange a series of group competitions. This not only emphasized the sportsmanship of friendship first and competition second, but also allowed the children to understand what true unity was. The competition was in full swing. The first day was the track competition, the second day was the field competition, and the third day was the group competition. Although the group tug-of-war held at the end successfully pushed the atmosphere of the sports meet to the peak, this also meant that this year's autumn sports meet was about to come to a successful end. On the rostrum, Nian took out the closing speech she had prepared and was about to announce the successful end of this year's autumn sports meet. However, the principal suddenly came to her side and directly grabbed the microphone from her hand. Hey, students, quiet down, I have something important to announce. Just now, I received a notice from the higher-ups. This year's autumn sports meet will add an additional competition event, so the end of the autumn sports meet will be postponed for 2 days. As for the competition content, I'll keep you guessing for now, I'll tell you tomorrow. Okay, that's it for today. Students, go home and have a good rest. Come back tomorrow to participate in the competition. Speaking of this, the principal suddenly paused and then continued with a serious face. Teachers of all grades and classes, gather at the big conference hall at 7 o'clock in the evening. I have something important to announce here. Following the principal's inexplicable speech, the autumn sports meet, which was supposed to end, was unexpectedly postponed for 2 days. They could play for 2 more days. While the children were happy, they were also intrigued by the additional competition content mentioned by the principal. Therefore, early the next morning, all the teachers and students of the school waited on the field as early as a few days ago. Everyone was eagerly waiting for the principal to officially unveil the mystery. What kind of competition was it? Why was it so mysterious? Okay, is everyone here? Now I announce, the first martial arts competition of the Capital Affiliated Primary School officially begins. Now, please introduce the rules of the competition to the students of each class. Registration will begin in half an hour. After hearing the words martial arts competition, there was a sudden burst of exclamations on the field. Even before the teacher explained, many of the senior children had already reacted. Martial arts competition? Wasn't it just for them to fight? Was this also a competition? In fact, the reason why the principal did not publicly announce today's competition content yesterday was to prevent the children from going home and telling their parents, which would cause conflict among their parents. After all, a martial arts competition was not the same as a running race. Although the school had already prepared combat protective clothing, in this kind of close combat situation, even with protective clothing, the school could not guarantee that the children would not be injured. Therefore, the principal knew that parents would never agree to let their children participate in this kind of competition. But the higher-ups asked him to take this opportunity to successfully hold a perfect martial arts competition, so as to set a new example for the country's primary and secondary schools. As long as the capital-affiliated primary school organized this martial arts competition beautifully, it would naturally be much easier for the Wu Lian to promote martial arts competitions to the whole country. The principal was caught in the middle and in a dilemma. In the end, he had to make such a decision to act first and report later. In short, just hold the competition first. Wasn't it just a martial arts competition? Have you watched a taekwondo competition? How could children have the strength to be injured wearing protective clothing? Anyway, as long as no children were injured, he would have a way to appease the angry parents. What? You said the family head was not satisfied with the school's arrangement? You want to complain to the Education Bureau? You are not satisfied no matter how I explain? If you are not satisfied, you can drop out. Chapter 553. Because it was the first time the school held a martial arts competition, the principal held an emergency discussion yesterday. The topic of the discussion was naturally the slightly different martial arts competition today. Since the school had no relevant experience in undertaking it, they would have to find their way to do it. Only by doing this beautifully and properly could the capital-affiliated elementary school live up to its title as the National Exemplary Elementary School, and continue to set a new example for the nation's primary and secondary schools. There was no other way. Who asked the higher-ups to give such an important task to the capital-affiliated elementary school? The burden on their shoulders was indeed heavy. The principal felt that the task was heavy, but the teachers felt that the task was a little hot. After all, this was not a track and field competition. Although martial arts had been particularly popular in the past 2 years and most of the children in the class had signed up for the martial arts training class, the teachers were still a little uncertain if they really wanted to compete. Even if the child succeeded in winning the first place, after the parents received the news, they might immediately chase to the school, and then make a fuss about it, and insist that the teacher give an explanation. Why should my child participate in such a dangerous competition? What if the child is injured? A martial arts competition? Isn't it just a fight? Which school encourages children to fight? Ordinary teachers at most received a fixed salary. How would they dare to easily offend the parents? Therefore, when the principal announced the official start of the martial arts competition, the teachers of each class carefully explained the content discussed in yesterday's meeting to the children. During this time, the teachers even explicitly and implicitly emphasized that no one was forced to participate in this martial arts competition. Everything was voluntary. Even if no one in the class signed up for the competition, the teachers would not feel embarrassed at all. Instead, they would be secretly happy. No one participated, which meant that no one would be injured. It saved them a lot of trouble and worry. How good was that? However, what the teachers never expected was the children's enthusiasm for this martial arts competition was far beyond their imagination. In the class with the most applicants, there was even a situation where the whole class wanted to sign up. Whether it was a boy or a girl, regardless of age, regardless of introverted or not, all the children who had participated in the martial arts training class raised their right hand high at that moment. Even the little girl who had always been well-behaved and clever, after hearing the teacher ask, "If you want to sign up, please raise your hand," she actually raised her little hand at the first moment. The teacher was stunned. Why was it so different from what they imagined? Were the children nowadays so violent? Were they not afraid of being beaten at all? Chen Yan, put your hand down. The martial arts competition is held between people of the same grade. Look at that small body of yours. Who can you beat on the stage? You're not allowed to participate. It's settled then. All right, a class can only have a maximum of 5 participants. Now, I will choose the participants. Seeing that the situation was getting out of control, the teacher decisively decided to have the final say and stripped Nian of her right to participate in the competition. When Nian heard this, she pouted unhappily and retorted, "Teacher, I know martial arts. I will be the Qin Shi Yin hand. Dad taught me. It's even more powerful than Arhut fist." As soon as he said this, the whole class burst into laughter. As the old saying goes, there is no first place in literature and no second place in martial arts. If they were to compare academic results, Nian would claim second place, and no one in the class would dare to claim first place. However, if it was a martial arts competition, the entire class would not accept her as the class monitor. Nian was only 9 years old. Everyone in the class was 2 or 3 years older than her, but they couldn't outdo her in terms of academics, and they couldn't even beat her in fights? Who would be able to take this lying down? No one took Nian seriously, and this made her very angry. However, just as Nian was about to continue speaking and fight for herself, a discordant voice suddenly sounded from the back of the classroom. "Teacher, why don't we let Li Tangyue participate? Look at her body. If she stood on the stage, she would be able to kill someone just by sitting down, right? Ha 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 ha." As soon as these humiliating words came out, the entire class burst into laughter. The teacher was stunned for a moment, and did not reprimand her immediately. Instead, she subconsciously thought about the possibility. That's right. Didn't children fight to see who had the bigger body? Li Tangyue's body was indeed quite intimidating. If it were other mischievous children with Li Tangyue's body type, the teacher would definitely send them to the competition without hesitation. However, with Li Tangyue's introverted and almost depressed personality, sending her to the martial arts competition was equivalent to sending her to the execution ground. Therefore, the child who made this suggestion had ulterior motives. She clearly wanted to see Li Tangyue make a fool of herself. Thinking of this, the teacher finally came back to her senses, so she deliberately pretended to be angry and scolded sternly. "Who said this? Stand up for me." The teacher originally just said it casually, and wanted to intimidate the children in the class. Who would have thought, as soon as she finished speaking, a tall girl directly stood up and said proudly, "Teacher, I said it." Zhao Yu? The teacher still had a deep impression of this girl who looked quite likable. Zhao Yu started school late, and was now 12 years old. In addition, girls developed early, so she was already a little lotus flower that showed its sharp edges. It was very obvious that she was different from the other girls in the class. When the others were still girls, Zhao Yu was the first to transform into a young girl. As a rebellious girl who started putting on makeup in elementary school, Zhao Yu naturally did not like ugly fat women like Li Tangyue. Therefore, Zhao Yu used to tease Li Tangyue a lot. It was not until Nian joined grade 6 class 2, and stood up for Li Tangyue, that Zhao Yu chose to give up for a period of time. Sometimes, the hatred between girls came so easily. Nian never provoked anyone. However, her performance, her grades, her looks, and her behavior, it was very easy to attract hatred. Zhao Yu hated Li Tangyue to begin with, but now Chen Yan had suddenly appeared. This was great. The hatred in Zhao Yu's heart naturally doubled. Double kill. "Teacher, I want to sign up. Because I have already obtained the warrior certification, and am now a stage 1 warrior." Just like Taekwondo, in the process of promoting the martial arts trend, the Wu Lian did not forget to come up with a set of very scientific martial arts evaluation criteria. Among them, stages 1, 2, and 3 were beginner warriors, stages 4, 5, and 6 were intermediate warriors, and stages 7, 8, and 9 were advanced warriors. Although stage 1 was just the beginning, it was enough to scare many people. After all, Zhao Yu was only a 12-year-old girl. The strength of a stage 1 warrior was enough for her to beat the entire grade. You have a warrior rank? Okay, then I'll count you in. After hearing Zhao Yu's self-report, the teacher was suddenly happy and seemed to have forgotten to pursue the matter. It couldn't be helped. Who asked this Zhao Yu's background to be not simple? The daughter of a rich family in Beijing. Can't afford to offend. Seeing that the teacher was no longer pursuing the matter, Nian could not help but look up at Li Tangyue in the front row. As usual, this big fat girl was bent over the table at this moment, as if she did not hear the mocking laughter just now. Not sure if it was because Chen Shi taught her the Qin Shi Yun hand, but Nian's personality was becoming more and more like Qin Shi etchings. Therefore, after looking at Li Tangyue in front of her, and then looking back at Zhao Yu behind her, her bad temper came up on the spot. Teacher, I'm also a stage 1 warrior. Why can she participate but I can't? Come. Wonderful book house. Chapter 554. Teacher, I'm also a first stage martial artist. Why can she participate, but I can't? Nian's clear questioning voice suddenly sounded in the classroom. The teacher's face slightly changed on the spot. This child, how could she be so disobedient? The reason why the teacher didn't allow Nian to participate in the martial arts tournament was out of good intentions. He didn't think that this little girl would act like she ate the wrong medicine today, insisting on standing up to make him unable to back down. I'll say it again, this martial arts tournament is held between the same grade. You're already in the 6th grade, so your opponents are at least 2 or 3 years older than you. Are you sure you want to participate? The teacher's face was a bit ugly, but because of Nian's usual performance, the teacher didn't care about her contradicting behavior, and once again emphasized the cruelty of the martial arts tournament. He tried to persuade Nian to give up this inexplicable idea. After all, children can't be compared to adults. A 2 or 3 year age gap will directly cause the two sides to never be on the same level. Professional boxing matches are divided into lightweight and heavyweight weight, but this martial arts tournament, because of the lack of experience, did not pay attention to the details. As long as Nian signed up for the tournament, it means that she may meet Zhao Yu, who is taller than her, heavier than her, and even have longer arms and legs than her. Isn't this just looking for abuse? The teacher really didn't want Nian to participate, but this time Nian was like a tortoise that ate a scale, determined to participate in the tournament. Teacher, I'm sure. Hearing Nian's resolute answer, the teacher frowned and thought for a while, then finally agreed to her request. Okay, then I'll count you in. The teacher thought that Nian really had the strength of a first-stage martial artist. But in fact, Nian didn't even go to a martial arts training class. Where can she find a martial artist qualification certificate? This little girl lied. She learned how to lie. And the reason why Nian did this, on one hand, was because she really wanted to participate. On the other hand, it was entirely because of Zhao Yu. Just like how Zhao Yu was unhappy with her, Nian had been unhappy with Zhao Yu for a long time. In Nian's eyes, Li Tangyue was a kind and pitiful girl. She was just a little fatter. Did she get in anyone's way? Why did she have to be bullied every day? Although the whole class was ostracizing Li Tangyue, after Nian's observation during this period of time, she found that there were only a few people who were taking the lead. One of them was Zhao Yu. What was even more infuriating was that Zhao Yu's bullying methods were much better than Skinny Monkey's. At most, Skinny Monkey would take the lead to kick up a fuss. He didn't really hate Li Tangyue. However, Zhao Yu didn't know what was going on. It was as if Li Tangyue's existence would lower her beauty, so she spent all day thinking of ways to target Li Tangyue. Even if she unintentionally passed by Li Tangyue, Zhao Yu would unintentionally leave behind 1 or 2 sarcastic words to hurt Li Tangyue's fragile heart. As the saying goes, hurtful words were like sharp knives. The person who said it was calm and indifferent, but the person who heard it was covered in cuts and bruises. In school, this kind of sharp-tongued girl was the most difficult to deal with. It was fine if she called out her name, but she didn't do that. There were a few times when Nian was on the verge of exploding, but in the end, she forced herself to hold it in. There was no other way. She really couldn't find anything that could be used against Zhao Yu, so she couldn't stand up for Li Tangyue. Looking at Li Tongyue's increasingly depressed mental state, Nian Nian felt that she needed to properly vent her anger for her. Zhao Yu Chen Nian, who else in our class is a first-stage warrior? Wang Xiaohu you too. Okay, then the three of you will go together. Zhao Yu and Nian Nian were both girls, so the teacher looked left and right. In the end, he chose the strongest boy among the children who raised their hands. After the class teachers submitted their class's contestants, the school quickly came up with a decent competition schedule. To be honest, the enthusiasm of the children was a bit out of the principal's expectations. He originally thought that there wouldn't be enough participants for this competition, but the result was completely different from what he imagined. If it weren't for the teachers who noticed that something was wrong and promptly asked the principal to limit the number of participants, the number of people who signed up would have increased by several times. Okay, all the teachers of each class have received the competition schedule, right? I now announce that the first martial arts competition of the capital-affiliated primary school officially begin. Referees, please take your positions. Following the principal's order, a dozen or so temporary martial arts instructors took on the role of referees for this martial arts competition. Because of their age, children under the 3rd grade didn't need to compete. They only needed to perform a complete set of Arhut fists, and the referees would score them based on their performance. The one with the highest score would be the champion. This kind of competition naturally wasn't worth watching. Therefore, when the 4th grade students went on stage, the atmosphere was instantly pushed to the peak. The school found a lot of gymnastics mats and neatly spread them on the field, suddenly turning the field into a huge open-air arena. The small players wore full protective suits and were eager to try. Under the leadership of the teachers in charge of their classes, they were madly cheering for them. From the Colosseum of Rome 2,000 years ago to the boxing ring now, fighting had always been the most exciting competition for the audience. Perhaps it was because of the atmosphere. These 8 or 9-year-old children showed a kind of fanatical ferocity as soon as they went on stage. As soon as the referee blew the whistle, the two sides would immediately pounce on each other and use their ancestral tortoise fists. After 2 or 3 moves, the two would hug each other and roll around on the mats. This was a fight between children. As for things like Arhut fists, moves, and so on, sorry, these all didn't exist. Anyway, everyone was wearing protective suits, and the fists didn't hurt. So there was only one way to determine the winner, and that was, either you press me to the ground and can't get up, or I press you to the ground and can't get up. It was supposed to be a martial arts competition, but in the blink of an eye, it turned into a wrestling competition. Looking at the child's red face and the adorable look of wanting to fall down, the teachers could finally put down their worried hearts. It turned out that they were overthinking. These children all had small arms and legs, so how could they perform any decent martial arts moves? If someone could perform a set of tortoise fists smoothly, they would probably be able to take home the championship trophy. Chapter 555. Although the Arhut fist could be considered a martial art with killing power, there were only a few people who could truly master it through a comprehensive study of its martial arts. In fact, this is the same as learning the piano. The piano was born in 1700 and has a history of more than 300 years. But until today, how many people in the world can play the piano, and how many people are proficient in the piano? Therefore, in just a few years, no matter how turbulent the momentum of the martial arts craze is, ordinary people without the guidance of a master, and without the relevant experience can only put on a show at most. There are still too few people who can really rely on their talent and self-learning. And even adults can't use the true power of Arhut fist, let alone these children who are less than 10 years old. So, the capital-affiliated primary school's first martial arts competition turned into a farce. Looking at the children on the stage, the teachers couldn't help but shake their heads and laugh. The children did try very hard. At least their starting positions were decent. But when it came to the real fight, their silly and cute appearance didn't make people feel threatened at all. It has to be said, the way they fight seriously is really too cute. In the end, the 4th grade's championship trophy was won by a little fatty relying on his physical advantage. As soon as the 4th grade's competition ended, it was the 5th grade's turn to go on stage. it can be seen that there is still a big difference between the 4th grade and the 5th grades. Especially when it comes to making moves, the 5th grade's children can already make a gorgeous combination of straight punches and leg sweeps. Although they still can't use the 3 sunflower style to catch the 8th grade's gorgeous combo. As the contestants get older and older, the level of excitement of the competition begins to rise. Until the first child with the title of first stage martial artist came on stage, the atmosphere was suddenly pushed to the highest point. What is the first stage martial artist's rating standard? That is to be able to make a complete set of Arhut fist in actual combat. It's not some tortoise fist, nor is it a random fight, but a real punch and kick, thoroughly using Arhut fist in actual combat. As the saying goes, 7 stars of Arhut, step by step ding ding. Moving left and rushing right, fast as the wind, left and right meteors rushing to the chest. Don't go up, don't go down. Hammer in the center, become 8 trigrams. 2 hands out of the chest, gods and ghosts don't dare to come. As more and more martial artists entered the stage, the children who were only fighting based on their primitive instincts were quickly defeated. The 5th grade competition was already quite valuable, so the teachers couldn't help but have more expectations for the 6th grade children. They only hoped to see an exciting battle between dragons and tigers. For this reason, the principal had even transferred 2 cameramen to record this year's martial arts competition in all aspects. She only hoped that the 6th grade children's performance would not disappoint her. The result was just as everyone expected. Because their minds were more mature, the 6th grade children's punches were naturally much smoother than those of the lower grades. Their moves were also more methodical. Finally, it was the turn of the contestants from Year 6 Class 2 to take the stage. Zhao Yu was in front of Nian Nian, and her appearance brought the atmosphere to a climax. A girl. She was the first girl to go on stage. Moreover, Zhao Yu's figure was tall, and her chest was slightly bulging. Therefore, the moment she went on stage, the boy opposite her immediately blushed and didn't dare to look at her again. What needs to be mentioned here is, because of the intentions of the teachers of each class, there were basically no girls participating in this year's martial arts competition. The lack of participants also caused the competition to be unable to split into male and female groups, so Nian Nian and Zhao Yu's opponents were both boys. Different from Nian Nian's immaturity, Zhao Yu's body already had a bit of the unique charm of a young girl. Children nowadays matured early, and because of her wealthy family background, Zhao Yu secretly learned how to put on makeup a long time ago on the internet. Although her makeup skills were not very good, compared to a group of primary school students, she was still too dazzling. Therefore, when Zhao Yu went on stage, many of the brats in the audience seemed to have been injected with chicken blood, and shouted excitedly, Year 6 Class 1 Lu Hao please advise. Year 6 Class 2 Zhao Yu please advise. Under the guidance of the referee, the 2 children bowed to each other and introduced themselves, and Zhao Yu made the first move. Although the boy was also a Dan warrior, he seemed to adhere to the concept of a straight man who did not hit a woman. Even when Zhao Yu used a standard set of punches and kicks, he still did not have the slightest intention of fighting back. Seeing this, Zhao Yu was not surprised at all, and instead took advantage of the situation to attack fiercely. She suddenly bent down, and with a sweep of her leg, kicked the boy directly to the ground, then jumped up high, and at the same time, bent her elbow to fiercely punch the boy's chest with the tip of her elbow. Stop! When the referee felt that something was wrong, he sternly shouted to stop, but the boy was already lying on the ground holding his chest and groaning in pain. Although he was wearing protective gear, Zhao Yu's somersault punch still hurt him. Zhao Yu victory. After confirming that the boy's injury was not serious, the referee announced the result of the competition. Then, under the admiring gaze of the crowd, Zhao Yu slowly walked down the stage. Obviously, Zhao Yu's fierce performance not only did not scare the audience, but it also refreshed everyone's understanding of their goddess. Goddess can only be admired from afar, but not touched. After Zhao Yu, it was Nian Nian's turn to go on stage. If Zhao Yu was compared to a cold and arrogant goddess, then Nian Nian was obviously the harmless little girl next door. Year 6 Class 1 Hao Jia please enlighten me. Year 6 Class 2 Chen Yan please enlighten me. Following Nian Nian's self-introduction, there was a sudden burst of cheers from the audience. Class monitor, do your best. You're the best. Chen Nian, Chen Nian, Chen Nian. Nian Nian looked back, and only then did she realize that the people cheering for her were the classes that she used to be in. For example, the former Year 1 Class 1, the current Year 3 Class 2, the former Year 3 Class 2, the current Year 5 Class 2, although she was now the class monitor of Year 6 Class 2. These former classmates obviously did not forget the class monitor who shone like a comet. Nian Nian skipped 2 grades, but who would have thought that she would become the most popular child in the school because of this? Seeing so many people cheering for Nian Nian, Zhao Yu immediately snorted in anger. But soon, a strange smile appeared on her face. Didn't Chen Nian like to be in the limelight? Then let's see how she will embarrass herself on stage later. What a coincidence. Zhao Yu's boyfriend was the boy named Hao Jie in front of her. The two of them came from the same courtyard, and their family backgrounds were not comparable to ordinary people. Moreover, both of their parents had a good relationship, so the two of them naturally got together. Zhao Yu had mentioned Nian Nian to Hao Jie before, so she knew very well. Hao Jie would definitely stand up for her. Come. Wonderful book house. Chapter 556. There were many spectators for today's martial arts competition. In addition to the entire school's teachers and students, as well as the temporarily hired cameraman, Chenxi also secretly came to the scene to watch the battle. After all, how could a broadcast be as exciting as watching a battle live? This was Nian Nian's first battle, so of course, Chenxi had to personally come to the scene to cheer for his daughter. Therefore, while the students were cheering for Nian Nian, Chenxi's figure appeared out of thin air on the roof of the teaching building next to the field. Meow, sensing Chenxi's arrival, Big Cat immediately jumped down from the treetop. Then, as if possessed by Spider-Man, it ran perpendicularly along the wall to the roof. After arriving at the roof, Big Cat jumped onto Chenxi's shoulder. Then, like before, it licked its paws and then laid on Chenxi's shoulder to take a nap. It seemed that it really couldn't arouse the slightest bit of interest in the jostling between children. Hey, did Nian Nian grow taller again? Chenxi casually stroked Big Cat's smooth and soft fur. Only then did he realize that Nian Nian seemed to have grown taller again. Even among the 6th graders, she wasn't considered short. This child, will she grow taller than her father in the future? While Chenxi was busy studying his daughter's height problem, Nian Nian welcomed the first battle of her life. Speaking of which, her opponent was not a cat or a dog. Instead, it was a well-known figure. If Nian Nian's reputation came mostly from her outstanding performance, then Hao Jie's was the exact opposite, because his reputation came mostly from the misdeeds he committed in his daily life. This was a troublesome brat, or you could also call him delinquent. Hao Jie started school late, and had just turned 12 years old, but he had already learned the ways of society from who knows where. When other people were still addicted to Mobile Legends, this kid was already smoking, drinking, and dating. He really won at the starting line of life. However, being rebellious was being rebellious. In the end, Hao Jie was only a 12-year-old boy, so his relationship with Zhao Yu was more like a special relationship of mutual recognition and cooperation. Both of them hoped to use this opportunity to show their uniqueness and arouse the envy and admiration of their classmates. This would satisfy their desire to win. The moment Hao Jie heard the name Chen Nian, he remembered what Zhao Yu once said to him. Although in Hao Jie's eyes, Nian Nian was obviously a little girl. But as Zhao Yu's boyfriend, Hao Jie felt obligated to stand up for his girlfriend. Therefore, after he went on stage, he gave Nian Nian a fierce middle finger. Obviously, this action was done specifically for Zhao Yu to show his determination. In addition, Hao Jie also wanted to use this opportunity to scare Nian Nian. It would be best if Nian Nian lowered her head and admitted defeat. This way, he wouldn't be criticized for bullying girls, and at the same time, he could get back his girlfriend's dignity. Compared to Hao Jie's fierceness, Nian Nian's reaction was a little cute. Although she didn't understand why Hao Jie was so hostile to her, she knew what it meant to give her the middle finger. Therefore, Nian Nian pouted unhappily. Match start. The referee didn't notice Hao Jie's little action. When he saw that the two young contestants were in position, he blew the whistle. The match started. In front of the entire school, Hao Jie still had some restraint. Therefore, he didn't immediately rush towards Nian Nian. Instead, he stood on the spot and waved at Nian Nian. Seeing this, Nian Nian didn't hold back. She only heard Aya to boost her courage, and then stupidly rushed towards Hao Jie. Here's what needs to be mentioned for safety reasons. The school forced every child to wear boxing gloves. Nian Nian had always been practicing palm techniques, so when she got close to Hao Jie, she stupidly used her fist instead of her palm, and directly threw a punch towards Hao Jie's face. Aya, this silly child. Didn't you see that he was already in a blocking stance? She actually went to feed others moves like this? As the most discerning spectator, Chun-Shi sat on the rooftop, stroking Big Cat while commenting on Nian Nian's moves. Sure enough, before Chun-Shi finished, Hao Jie raised his left arm to block Nian Nian's fist. At the same time, he swung his right fist and punched towards Nian Nian's lower abdomen. This move was the fourth style of Arhut fist. Clear the clouds and see the sun. Because she was wearing protective clothing, Nian Nian didn't suffer any damage from Hao Jie's punch, but the judges on the platform all took out pens to record it. Like all sports, the judges would give points based on the child's performance, and the one with the higher score would win. Because Nian Nian could still stand, the judge didn't immediately blow the whistle, but instead signaled for both sides to continue the competition. Hao Jie seemed to have some experience in martial arts competitions. Therefore, before Nian Nian could recover, he immediately withdrew his fist, and then kicked the outside of Nian Nian's calf. This was good. Even though she was wearing protective gear, Nian Nian still fell to the mat, because of her unstable center of gravity. Whoosh! After the sharp whistle sounded, Hao Jie immediately stopped and took 3 steps back. He had successfully knocked down his opponent. According to the referee's scoring rules, this kick should be worth 3 points, right? Chun Nian, can you still stand? Do you want to admit defeat? The judge quickly stepped forward to help Nian Nian up, and at the same time asked with concern. She was a child, after all. It was normal for her to admit defeat. However, when Nian Nian heard the judge's question, she immediately pouted and replied unhappily, "No, I can stand up, I didn't lose." After saying that, the little girl seemed to have eaten gunpowder. She immediately got up from the ground and got into a fighting stance again. Okay, then be careful, don't get hurt. The judge gestured for both of them to stand properly, ready to start the competition again. But at this time, Nian Nian suddenly did something unexpected. She quickly put the glove on her mouth and took it off in a few moves. What are you doing? Put the gloves on. The judge noticed Nian Nian's actions and immediately scolded her. Hearing this, not only did Nian Nian not listen to the judge's request, but she also deliberately threw the gloves out of the ring, retorting at the same time, "No, I don't know the Arhut fist, Dad taught me palm techniques. I can't use palm techniques with the gloves on." Palm techniques? The judge was also a martial artist. After hearing what the little girl said, he immediately looked at the main stage hesitantly. This was a rule set by the school. Wearing gloves was to prevent the child from getting hurt. But martial arts and boxing were different after all. Martial arts not only consisted of fist techniques, but also finger techniques and palm techniques, so wearing gloves was equivalent to wearing shackles. On the main stage, after the judge's explanation, the principal finally understood the crux of the matter. So he nodded to the audience and readily agreed to the little girl's request not to wear gloves. The principal wanted to see what was so special about this little girl's palm techniques. Okay, let the competition begin again. Listen to my whistle. 1, 2, 3, whoosh! Chapter 557. Why didn't Chun-Shi directly teach Nian Nian sword techniques and immortal methods, but let her start from practicing martial arts like an ordinary person? That was because Chun-Shi didn't want Nian Nian to become too different. Perhaps many people couldn't understand this point of view, but as long as you put yourself in his shoes, it was actually very easy to understand. Humans were social creatures. Chun-Shi was no exception, and Nian Nian was no exception. If a person didn't have friends, then how lonely would she be? That kind of loneliness that always lingered in one's heart could sometimes actually kill a person. Like other children, Nian also had many friends. Xiaoyu grew up in the same courtyard, the twin brothers grew up on the same street, and then Li Sanduo and Li Tangyue, who were in the same class. Chunxi was old. Nian was still very young. Her friends would only increase. However, how many of her friends could keep up with her fast pace? They were clearly good friends who grew up together. In the blink of an eye, Nian, with the halo of a genius, jumped one level after another in school. Nian was already in the 6th grade. The two brothers who were once close to her were now still in the 3rd grade. This change was not obvious at first, but as Nian gradually adapted to the life of the 6th grade and began to try to integrate into this new environment, it was destined that she had to say goodbye to her yesterday. The once close relationship was now gradually drifting apart. It was not because someone had changed again. It was because everyone had grown up again. Compared to the long life of an immortal cultivator, the ignorant childhood was too short and precious. Chunxi didn't want to deprive Nian of her childhood with the inherent concept of cultivating as early as possible, because this would only lead to the loss of a child's childhood. Thinking about it carefully, wasn't Qin Xueqing a typical case of childhood loss? Sister, come on, beat him down. In the crowd, the two brothers didn't care about the strange gazes of the surrounding students at all, and cheered for Nian at the top of their lungs. The two of them had already shouted loudly enough. However, Nian was so focused that she didn't hear the two brothers' shouts at all. This was the first time she had fought with someone. It was obviously impossible to say that she wasn't nervous in her heart. Therefore, after taking off the gloves on her hands, Nian immediately followed Chunxi's usual teachings and directly assumed the posture of an elbow wrap. What was cloud hand? In ancient scrolls often used a spiral shape to represent the rotation of clouds in the wind. There was also a very elegant combination of hand in the classic dance. This set of skills was a combination of painting and dance moves, so it was named cloud hand. What needed to be mentioned here was, martial arts was divided into external style and SS external styles focused arts as hand. There was no superiority and inferiority. S's masters a masters to master. And this was what the older generation often said, train the muscles, bones and skin externally, and train the breath internally. Most of the Arhut Fist's moves were fierce and forceful. It was the standard external style, so how Jiez's attack looked fierce. As the saying goes, once an expert makes a move, the truth will be known. Nian had just assumed hers fighting stance, and the referee's interest was immediately piqued. Looking at her stance, this kid seemed to have some skill? Just now, because the gloves were too much of a hindrance, Nian was defeated by Hao Jie the moment she came up, so she naturally felt a little unconvinced. That round didn't count. Start over. Fighting with a little girl already made Hao Jie feel a little embarrassed. But after the opponent fell, she still put on an unconvinced look, which made Hao Jie feel a little annoyed. Kids at this age were the most prideful. Unconvinced? Then I'll beat you until you're convinced. Hence, the moment the referee's whistle sounded, Hao Jie seemed to have eaten gunpowder and rushed towards Nian. Maybe he wanted to use this to establish his dominance, so Hao Jie didn't use his Arhut Fist this time, but took out his famous ultimate move. Flying kick. Hao Jie. Seeing Hao Jie jump high and kick towards Nian, the teachers couldn't sit still. With this kick, wouldn't Nian be sent flying out of the arena? The principal was still watching from above. How could this kid not know his limits? From the moment Hao Jie sped up and jumped to the moment the teachers shouted to stop, everything happened in the blink of an eye. But just when everyone thought that Nian would be sent flying by Hao Jie's kick, an unexpected scene suddenly happened. In actual fact, if her reaction was fast enough, Nian could totally avoid Hao Jie's flashy flying kick. But instead of dodging, she immediately bent her knees and got into a horse stance, then swung her arms like willow branches by the river. It looked messy, but it actually had a deeper meaning. As expected, just when Hao Jie's right leg was about to hit Nian suddenly hugged his right leg, then borrowed the force from Hao Jie's leg to spin in a circle, then threw Hao Jie out of the arena. Io, get up. You're crushing my leg. Perhaps it was because Hao Jie used too much force, but after his body fell onto the mat, he rolled a few times on the mat. He only stopped when he hit the audience on the side. Xiao, Hao Jie has gone out of bounds. Chen Yan wins. After the sharp whistle sounded, the referee announced the result of this round's competition. No one would have thought that Hao Jie would lose in such a way. The teachers didn't understand the twists and turns, and only thought that Hao Jie accidentally flew out of the arena because he wanted to look cool. But the referee at the side understood the crux of the matter, so he directly declared Chen Yan the winner. How was this a mistake? In the face of Hao Jie's flying kick, not only did Chen Yan not dodge, he even seized the opportunity at the crucial moment of his opponent's mistake. Taking advantage of the situation, he used Hao Jie's strength to successfully turn it into his own, and threw Hao Jie out of the ring. This was a competition, not a duel. It was based on the performance of both parties. Nian Yan got 1 point for not panicking in the face of danger, 1 point for not dodging, and 1 point for the correct response. But Hao Jie? Not only did he fail to show off, he even fell out of bounds. This kind of performance was basically enough to get a negative score. This was the referee's evaluation criteria. Just based on this move alone, Chen Yan deserved to win. This was a martial arts competition, so naturally, one couldn't just compete with brute force, but also with brains. Flying kick in the air? The move was cool, but could it hit someone? The referee had his own evaluation criteria, so after announcing this round's result, he immediately signaled for the next round's contestants to take their places. Although the teachers didn't understand the strength of the move, after hearing the referee's judgment, they still led the crowd in cheering for Nian Yan. They really didn't expect this. This little girl could actually win against Hao Jie. Everyone was congratulating Nian Yan. But at this moment, a very discordant voice suddenly sounded. This isn't fair. There's a conspiracy. The referee blew a black whistle. I don't accept this. Chapter 558. Black Whistle? Upon hearing this, even Nian Yan could not help but turn around to take a look. Wasn't it Hao Jie who was making a ruckus? Looking at how lively and energetic he was, it was no wonder that he would be so indignant. As the leader of the 6th grade class 1, as well as a famous person in school, Hao Jie's words were immediately echoed by many students below the stage. Unfair. Hao Jie did not lose. The referee blew the black whistle. Fight again. That's right, let's fight again. As the members of the 6th grade class 1 stood up to support Hao Jie, the audience's stance changed. That's right, Hao Jie only accidentally rolled off the stage. Why did the referee decide that he had lost? Was there really a conspiracy? Some of the more cowardly children did not dare to stand up and question the referee, but they still hid in the crowd and booed. Seeing that the situation was getting out of hand, the referee in charge of this competition was immediately angered. Xiao. He whistled fiercely and quickly walked to the center of the stage. Looking at the audience below the stage, he scolded sternly. As a martial artist, how could we do such dirty things behind the scenes? In this round of competition, Hao Jie has clearly made 3 big mistakes. First, he underestimated his opponent. Second, he was too arrogant. Third, he did not withdraw his move in time to remedy the situation. And after making a mistake, he still insisted on doing it his way. If this was not a competition but a life and death duel, then I can tell you with absolute certainty, Hao Jie, he would be a dead man now. In a battle between experts, victory or defeat was determined by a single move. If it were any other child, the referee might not have been so harsh. But Hao Jie was different. He was a first-stage martial artist with a martial artist certification, but now he had made such a serious mistake in a real battle. And this was something that the referee could not tolerate. After all, martial arts were not child's play. Being strict with children was truly for their own good. Even though Hao Jie did not understand these principles, but after seeing the referee fly into a rage in front of everyone and displaying the unique aura of a martial artist, this kid was like an eggplant that had been hit by frost. Wilted. If you can't afford to offend the referee, then you can only blame yourself for being unlucky. Hao Jie returned to the area where his class was located unhappily. Next door was Year 6 Class 2. Hearing the laughter from the class next door, Hao Jie immediately became angry. What happened? Was he so proud of winning by a fluke? If you have the guts, don't leave after school. Otherwise, I'll definitely beat the crap out of you. Hao Jie was used to riding roughshod over others, so when he saw the skinny monkey's smug look, he immediately grabbed the mineral water beside him and threw it over with all his might. The mineral water bottle hit the skinny monkey's leg, and the skinny monkey immediately stood up angrily. Who threw it? But when he found out that it was Hao Jie who had hit him, he was terrified on the spot. He immediately pretended that nothing had happened and sat back down silently. After scaring the skinny monkey, Hao Jie's mood seemed to have improved a lot. Therefore, he immediately took out his phone and sent a message to Zhao Yu. Baby, I'm sorry. Zhao Yu was sitting not far away. After seeing the message, she did not reply immediately. Instead, she turned her head and glared at Hao Jie fiercely. It was obvious that Zhao Yu was angry. Since her boyfriend was so useless, she had to do it herself. She only hoped that Chen Yan would not be eliminated so quickly. The competition continued. After Zhao Yu and Nian Nian defeated their respective opponents, the final battle officially began in the first martial arts competition of the capital-affiliated primary school. The cold Zhao Yu versus the cute Chen Yan. No one would have thought that the champion would be between these two girls. Therefore, the moment the two girls appeared on the stage, there was an earth-shattering cheer from the audience. In this round, Chen Yan from Year 6 Class 2 will face Zhao Yu from Year 6 Class 2. Now I announce. The competition officially begins. Looking at the children on the stage, the form teacher of Year 6 Class 2 was so happy that she could not close her mouth. In short, no matter who won this competition, the first and second place would be on the heads of Year 6 Class 2. Therefore, before the two girls started fighting, the form teacher quickly walked to the side of the stage and whispered a few words to them, basically telling them to just do whatever they wanted. After all, they were all on the same side. It did not matter who won first place, right? It had to be said that the form teacher was taking things for granted. Xiao. Hearing the referee's whistle, Zhao Yu seemed to have transformed into a different person. With a cold face, she charged straight at Nian Nian. Zhao Yu was half a head taller than Nian Nian, so when she started fighting, her whole body emitted an extremely oppressive aura. Hey. Although the little girl looked delicate, she seemed to be even more vicious than Hao Jie when it came to fighting. In fact, before she went on stage, Zhao Yu had already made up her mind. Today, in front of everyone, she must teach this annoying girl a lesson. With Hao Jie as an example, there was no way Zhao Yu would give Nian Nian another chance. Hence, she immediately used her best move, Vajra subduing the tiger. Seeing this, Nian Nian remained calm. She immediately faced the direction of Zhao Yu's attack and raised her hand to meet it. The Arhut fist was characterized by its straightforwardness and ferocity. The Qin Shiyun hand was characterized by its erratic movements and restraint. Chapter 559. Aya, why are you so fierce? Zhao Yu wasn't the one who said that. Instead, it was Nian Nian who was sitting on the ground. Her current actions were akin to someone who was suddenly pulled out of her seat during class. She took the opportunity to sit down on the ground, barely dodging Zhao Yu's heavy punch. They were classmates, but Zhao Yu was so fierce and decisive. She really didn't treat Nian Nian as one of her own. At that moment, even the audience couldn't help but sweat for Nian Nian. Luckily, Nian Nian was quick-witted enough to defuse this move. Otherwise, if Nian Nian were to take the full brunt of Zhao Yu's punch, even if she was wearing a protective helmet, Nian Nian's vision would probably turn black and she would feel dizzy. Such a fierce and tough style instantly made the atmosphere tense. The homeroom teacher couldn't help but exhort. Friendship first, competition second. We're all classmates. A competition is a competition. You two shouldn't be too serious. The homeroom teacher seemed to think that Zhao Yu was too heavy-handed. However, although Zhao Yu's moves were fierce, there was nothing wrong with her actions. Therefore, when the homeroom teacher advised Zhao Yu to be merciful, It would make people feel that she was biased. The teacher was biased towards Chen Yan? Thinking of this, Zhao Yu suddenly felt uncomfortable. However, she was still a person who cared about her reputation. Seeing Nian Yan sit on the ground, Zhao Yu hesitated for a moment. In the end, she gave up this great opportunity to attack and gave Nian Yan some time to recover. So what if the teacher was biased? This was a competition. Therefore, she had to defeat Chen Yan fair and square in front of everyone. This time, Zhao Yu had to convince everyone wholeheartedly. Yo, why is this child so angry? I guess Nian Yan must have been angry with you a lot? On the rooftop, Chen Shi expressed his opinion as he massaged the big cat. He could tell. This girl named Zhao Yu seemed to have an inexplicable hostility towards Nian Yan. And the source of this hostility should be the so-called jealousy. Although Nian Yan was much younger than Zhao Yu, no matter how one looked at it, Nian Yan was much more outstanding than Zhao Yu, which was why Zhao Yu was hostile towards her. Sometimes the hatred between girls was just that simple. When you are only a little better than others, others will be jealous of you. But when you are much more outstanding than others, others will envy you from the bottom of their hearts, and even see you as a role model. Sometimes people were just so strange. Zhao Yu's grades were not as good as Nian Yan's. Her looks were not as good as Nian Yan's. Even her popularity in school was not as good as Nian Yan's. If Nian Yan didn't sign up today, Zhao Yu could only hold her anger in. However, Nian Yan still wanted to stand out and steal her limelight. How could Zhao Yu tolerate this? Nian Yan was constantly knocked down, but she kept getting up. From the beginning to the end, her eyes were so firm. This was the first time Nian Yan fought with someone. Chen Shi could accept her falling, but he couldn't accept that she couldn't get up after falling. Therefore, when Nian Yan firmly said that she hadn't lost, Chen Shi couldn't help but smile with satisfaction. A snap of his fingers, a layer of seal, and this was Nian Yan's real strength. She wanted to win. He had won fair and square, in a grand and glorious manner. Feeling the cool feeling constantly gushing out from her abdomen, Nian Yan suddenly froze in place. This feeling was so strange. It was icy cold. So comfortable. Thinking of this, Nian Yan couldn't help but reach out and rub her stomach. When she raised her head again, she found that Zhao Yu had rushed in front of her. It was still the same set of moves that she was familiar with. Vajra subduing the tiger, the momentum was overwhelming. But this time, Zhao Yu's movements were like a slow-motion scene with upgraded special effects. Every move was seen by Nian Yan. Therefore, she slowly reached out her left hand and directly grabbed Zhao Yu's right wrist. Then, she did what her father usually taught her. She twisted her hips, turned her waist, lowered her elbow and pressed her wrist. This set of movements was like moving clouds and flowing water. She easily grabbed Zhao Yu and threw her aside. Chapter 560. Whoosh. I announce. The winner of this round is Chen Yan. With the sharp whistle, the first martial arts competition of the capital-affiliated primary school finally came to an end. R, A, and W, N, W, 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 R, A, N, W, E, N, A, C, O, M. Then, Nian Yan was pushed to the rostrum by her homeroom teacher. Much to the surprise of all the teachers and students. She looked at the shiny gold trophy in Nian Yan's hands, then at the dull silver trophy in her own hands. At that moment, tears of resentment and unwillingness flowed down Zhao Yu's cheeks. She couldn't accept it. But so what if she couldn't accept it? She had been so close to ending the competition. But just as the winner was about to be revealed, Chen Yan seemed to have taken a stimulant. She exploded with power that could make anyone feel despair. It was terrifying. Zhao Yu would never have thought that, in Nian Yan's small body, there was actually an accumulation of vital essence comparable to that of a foundation establishment cultivator. Chen Shi had only torn a small crack in the seal. And the true essence that had been accumulated for a long time made Zhao Yu experience what despair was. In the face of absolute power, all techniques were futile. The judges had noticed the change in Nian Yan, but with their current knowledge they couldn't see through it. So if they really had to find an explanation, they could only choose to believe that Chen Nian had been deliberately hiding her strength. She had won. He had won fair and square, in a glorious manner. Although Nian Nian didn't know why she had won, it didn't affect her good mood. She wanted to give this trophy to her father. Her father would be happy for her. Thinking of this, Nian Nian's smile became even brighter. With the good mood after winning the championship, Nian Nian returned to the classroom happily with the support of a group of students. Now she just had to wait for the teacher to reward her. The teacher had said before that any student who could get a place in the sports meet could make a wish in public, and then the whole class would work together to fulfill it. In short, as long as this wish is not too ridiculous, the teacher will try his best to fulfill it for everyone. It was rare to see the teacher being so generous, so as soon as the students returned to the classroom, they gathered in groups of 3 to 5 and started discussing. As the host of the games, Nian Nian had not participated in any events before. However, she had won the championship in the martial arts competition, so she had a chance to fulfill her wish. Therefore, after the little girl returned to her seat with the trophy, she began to think about what she should wish for later, just like the other students. Do you want snacks? Or do you want toys? Or was it a souvenir? This was the reward Nian Nian deserved for bringing honor to the class, so she naturally had to think about it carefully. But just as she was hesitating, a familiar figure suddenly appeared in front of her and completely disrupted her train of thought. It was Li Tangyue. At this moment, Nian Nian suddenly realized. It seemed that she hadn't seen Li Tangyue for a long time. Where has she been these past few days? Thinking of this, Nian Nian put down the trophy in her hand, then reached out and patted Li Tangyue's arm, and asked with a puzzled expression, "Where have you been these past few days? Why haven't I seen you?" Hearing this, a strange expression flashed across Li Tangyue's face. As if she had just been a thief, she looked around and made sure that no one was paying attention to her. Then she replied hesitantly, "I didn't sign up for the competition, so of course you couldn't see me." Oh, okay. Nian Nian didn't doubt her. After hearing Li Tangyue's answer, she handed the trophy in her hand to Li Tangyue and said proudly, "Look, my trophy. Isn't it beautiful?" Perhaps because the sports meet was held every year, there were no trophies for other events. Only the top 3 of the martial arts competition had trophies. This was the gold trophy that only the champion could have. Although the workmanship was a bit rough, it was special, wasn't it? Didn't Li Tangyue not sign up for the competition? Therefore, Nian Nian wanted to share her happiness with her, so she directly stuffed the trophy into Li Tangyue's hands. "This is the trophy I got after I defeated Zhao Yu. Hers is silver, mine is gold. She was defeated by me. If she dares to bully you in the future, I'll throw this trophy at her face. Humph, I'll anger her to death." Nian Nian hooted with a smug expression. She felt that she had helped Li Tangyue vent her anger. However, after Li Tangyue heard this, the expression on her face was still a little strange. At this time, Nian Nian finally noticed Li Tangyue's abnormality, so she immediately went over and asked with concern, "Li Tangyue? What's wrong with you? Are you feeling unwell?" "I'm fine." Seeing that Nian Nian was so concerned about her, Li Tangyue's face finally revealed a smile. "Thank you, Chen Nian." Seeing that Li Tangyue finally smiled, the smile on Nian Nian's face suddenly became much brighter. Because the homeroom teacher went to the office to collect the award, when the students returned to the classroom, they gathered in groups of 3 to 5 and whispered to each other, so the entire classroom was a little noisy. They were still in class, wasn't they? Therefore, after a few simple words with Li Tangyue, Nian Nian wanted to get up to maintain class discipline. However, at this time, Skinny Monkey-like's voice suddenly sounded from the back door of the classroom. "Big news! Big news! Everyone quiet down and listen to me." Skinny Monkey-like's voice was very loud and his expression was very exaggerated. Therefore, as soon as he entered the classroom, he attracted the attention of the entire class. "I just saw an announcement on the bulletin board. It was posted by the sports meet inspection team. The announcement said that someone in our class has repeatedly violated discipline. Guess, who is this person?" After hearing Skinny Monkey-like's words, a few students immediately asked with righteous indignation, Who is it? Isn't this dragging our class down? The sports meet inspection team. As the name implied, it was a special team responsible for maintaining order and inspecting the hygiene of each class during the sports meet. Since the inspection team issued an announcement, it meant that the student who was criticized did indeed make a big mistake. If this wasn't tarnishing the reputation of the class, then what was? Everyone was doing their best for the honor of the class, but this rat shit secretly tarnished the reputation of the class. Who could accept this? Therefore, the students of grade 6 class 2 were like ignited barrels of dynamite, exploding in an instant. Who is it? Who did it? Why aren't you standing up? Skinny Monkey-like hesitated for a moment, before suddenly pointing to the front of the classroom. Then he said with certainty, Li Tangyue. She did it. Chapter 561. Li Tangyue. She did it. With Skinny Monkey's shout, the eyes of the entire class suddenly gathered on Li Tangyue. W. Hearing this, Li Tangyue's reaction was the same as usual. She immediately lay on the table like an ostrich. It seemed that she didn't want to give a reasonable explanation. What did she do? Why was she criticized? A few male students were more hot-tempered. They stood up on the spot and questioned. Seeing this, Skinny Monkey immediately put on a look as if it had nothing to do with him. Then he pointed at Li Tangyue's back and said loudly, "How would I know? You guys go ask her." After hearing Skinny Monkey's words, the students' eyes suddenly fell on Li Tangyue. It wasn't that Skinny Monkey was deliberately targeting Li Tangyue, but Li Tangyue's behavior had indeed aroused public anger. As a member of grade 6 class 2, everyone tried their best to fight for the honor of the class during the sports meet. But what was Li Tangyue doing? Not only did she not sign up for any competitions, but she didn't even participate in the group events. Of course, participation in the sports meet was not compulsory, so if Li Tangyue was determined not to participate, no one could force her to sign up. If she didn't sign up, then so be it. At most, they could just pretend that she didn't exist. Li Tangyue was selectively ignored by everyone. But who would have thought that, during this sports meet, not only did Li Tangyue not win any honor for the class, but she also secretly smeared the reputation of the class behind their backs. When everyone's collective sense of honor was at its highest, Li Tangyue made such a mistake that damaged the class's image. How could the students accept this? Therefore, no one knew who took the lead, but a language book suddenly cut through the air and directly hit Li Tangyue's back. Bang! Li Tangyue was lucky. The four corners of the textbook didn't hit her, so it didn't hurt very much. But then countless language textbooks were like a rainstorm. One after another, they were thrown at Li Tangyue. At that moment, Li Tangyue was like a prisoner being paraded on the street, being attacked crazily by her classmates. After the textbooks were thrown, they threw stationery. In any case, they threw whatever was convenient. Damn fat pig. Get out. Our class doesn't welcome you. Scram. Confucius once said, "If he is not my disciple, I will beat the drum and attack him." Li Tangyue was in such a situation now. She was not popular with her classmates to begin with, and she had tarnished the reputation of the class. That was why she was attacked by her classmates like this. Nian was sitting next to Li Tangyue. Perhaps someone's hand accidentally shook, so one of the textbooks that were originally thrown at Li Tangyue suddenly flew to her head. One had to know that Nian was also hot-tempered now. So before the textbook hit her, she reached out and knocked the textbook down. Then she stood up and shouted at the class, "Stop! What are you doing?" Nian flipped out again. But this time her bravery did not help at all. The students were still throwing things at Li Tangyue, and kept shouting that Li Tangyue should be kicked out of class too. Seeing this, Nian didn't know where she got the strength from, but she suddenly slammed her hand on the desk. Bang! The loud sound shocked everyone present. Everyone looked carefully and realized that Nian's desk had been broken by her slap. One had to know that this was not a rotten wooden desk in a village primary school. Chun Yan was actually able to break this iron desk with a single slap? The noisy classroom finally quietened down. For a moment, everyone could not help but keep quiet out of fear. The situation was finally under control. Nian hurriedly glanced at the class before quickly walking to Li Tangyue's side. However, just as she was about to ask if Li Tangyue was injured, the voice of the head teacher suddenly came from outside the classroom. "What are you doing? Whose books are these? Why are they all thrown in the corridor? Do you not want to go to class?" After seeing the textbooks thrown all over the floor, the teacher's face immediately darkened. Therefore, as soon as he walked into the classroom, he slammed the certificate in his hand on the podium. "Speak. What's going on? What were you arguing about just now?" After hearing the teacher's voice, the students who were still excited just now suddenly went silent. At this moment, Zhao Yu's voice suddenly rang out in the silent classroom. "Teacher, Li Tangyue has been criticized by the school." It had to be said that this girl was indeed quite scheming. It was just a simple statement, but not only did it successfully divert the teacher's attention, but it also instantly pulled Li Tangyue back into the spotlight. After saying that, Zhao Yu even glared at Nian as if to show off. However, what Zhao Yu did not expect was, after hearing her words, the teacher only nodded slightly. There was not much reaction on his face. "Yes, I know." It turned out that when he was receiving the certificate in the office just now, the teacher had already heard the news from others. The entire school was criticized. It was not that Li Tangyue stole anything or hit someone during the sports meet. It was because Li Tangyue was unlucky to be caught by the inspection team 3 times in a row. As everyone knew, although they could move freely during the sports meet, they could not leave the class for too long. Perhaps it was because she was too fat. Li Tangyue had always been afraid of participating in the sports meet. Therefore, as soon as the sports meet began, she returned to the classroom alone to hide. This kind of behavior was absolutely not allowed by the school. When the inspection team caught Li Tangyue for the first time, she was fooled by the excuse of taking something. In the end, she was caught by the inspection team again the next day. This time, she could not fool them. After being reprimanded by the inspection team, Li Tangyue did not dare to stay in the classroom anymore. Instead, she hid on the rooftop. She hid like this for 3 days. She could not ask for leave, nor did she dare to show her face. Because as soon as she showed her face, her classmates would laugh and ask her to participate in the shot put event. "You're so fat, you must be very good at throwing shot put, right?" Li Tangyue was really under a lot of psychological pressure. However, the inspection team's teacher did not care about this. Therefore, when she was caught by the inspection team for the 3rd time on the rooftop, the teacher mercilessly recorded the name Li Tangyue in the inspection report. Her behavior was extremely bad and must be criticized by the entire school. Although Li Tangyue's behavior destroyed the collective image of the 6th grade class too, it also affected the performance of the form teacher. However, from the teacher's point of view, the form teacher could still understand Li Tangyue's behavior, so he did not want to pursue this matter too much. The teacher could understand Li Tangyue's behavior and motivation, but this did not mean that the students could understand. Therefore, after seeing the teacher's indifferent expression, the few students who had been the most vocal immediately stood up with angry faces. "Teacher, can you kick Li Tangyue out of our class? We don't welcome her." Chapter 562. Being ostracized was not a spur of the moment, but an accumulated disgust. Li Tangyue herself did not do anything wrong, but her image had a very bad impact on grade 6 class too. So much so that when the students in the class went out to the toilet, they might be asked by the students in the next class, "Is there a very, very fat girl in your class?" Perhaps this was just idle chatter, but in the ears of those who heard it, it was no less than a taunt. It was as if Li Tangyue's existence really pulled down the status of the entire class 2 of grade 6. Because of this, many students had been dissatisfied with Li Tangyue for a long time. Big fool. Damn fat woman. Ugly monster. However, scolding was one thing. Li Tangyue was used to being cautious. She would not have conflicts with anyone at all, so the students at most disliked her, but did not rise to the point of shouting and killing. If Nian's childhood was colorful, then Li Tongyue's childhood was obviously gray. From the moment she fell ill, she was subconsciously marginalized by everyone. Of course, if she could continue to be marginalized, wouldn't that be a good thing for Li Tongyue? She was not used to being the center of attention. So she was like an ostrich, burying her head in her arms, thinking that she could hide herself this way. But, no matter how Li Tongyue tried to escape, she could not avoid the fact that she was a member of this class. Therefore, from the moment Li Tongyue was criticized by the entire school, she was destined to be abandoned by the collective will. Do not underestimate the will of a collective, especially a collective formed by 11 or 12-year-old children. Li Tongyue had smeared the reputation of the class, so she had to get out of this class. This was a decision made by the collective will, and even the form teacher could not stop it. Therefore, when the first student shouted for Li Tongyue to get out of grade 6 class 2, the classroom, which was originally quiet, suddenly became lively again. Teacher, quickly chase Li Tongyue out. We don't welcome her. She's too bad. Not only did she not win glory for the class, but she also secretly smeared the reputation of the class. Our class does not welcome such a person. That's right. Get out. In the end, the students spontaneously shouted in unison. Li Tongyue, get out. Li Tongyue, get out. Li Tongyue, get out. This was the power of collective will. The homeroom teacher was over 30 years old this year. In his teaching career, which spanned more than 10 years, was it not rare for a teacher to be kicked out of class by a student? Even a teacher could be chased away, let alone a classmate who wasn't welcomed by the school. The teacher didn't know why Li Tongyue had caused so much public anger. However, as the head teacher of the 6th grade class 2, the teacher still couldn't accept the fact that the entire class was ostracizing one person. Then what do you want? As the champion of this martial arts competition, Nian naturally received more honor than everyone else. The teacher had previously considered increasing the reward for the champion, but due to the limited class fees, he could only give up on this idea. Like all the winners, Nian also received a chance to fulfill her wish. This wish could be a game skin or a cultural toy. But however, she had made a wish that was different from the others, so much so that everyone, including the teacher, was stunned. Teacher, my wish is, I hope that everyone will stop bullying Li Tongyue. At this point, Nian actually stood up from her seat with a look of excitement. Maybe I shouldn't use the word pitiful to describe her. But, she's really pitiful. Why? Why do you all bully her? What did she do wrong? You all said that she brought shame to the class. But if it weren't for you all laughing at her, why would she deliberately violate the school rules and secretly hide in the classroom to be caught by the inspection team? It turned out that while the teacher was giving out the award, Nian understood what happened from Li Tongyue. She heard Li Tongyue's inner voice, so she could empathize with Li Tongyue's experience. All this time, Li Tongyue had been silently enduring everything. She thought that as long as she kept her head down and didn't say anything, all the suffering would slowly dissipate with the wind. Just like what happened just now. Her teacher had only used a game skin, and was able to neutralize a powerful encirclement and annihilation into nothingness. Look at their indignant expressions just now. Looking at how happy they were right now. Nian really couldn't take it anymore. At this moment, she really wanted to ask everyone present, what do you think? Was Li Tongyue wrong? Or was the world wrong? Why? I only found a problem when I looked at the comments. Haven't you all had the experience of chasing a teacher off the stage? Not only did you ask the teacher to leave, but it was also very common to ask your classmates to leave. I personally experienced it 3 times, twice in my own class, and once in the next class, so I think the probability of this happening should be very high, right? Mobile version updated the fastest website, m. Even if an outsider lived here for 10 or 20 years, they would never be able to truly become a citizen of Shangjing. Perhaps when the last batch of Shangjing natives gradually grew old, the stories in those old alleys would slowly dry up with time, right? The wind outside was too strong, so Nian couldn't go out. She took the remote control and accompanied her to watch the Heaven Sword and Dragon Saber. Didn't her Xin Nian's Nanyang divine art come from here? Thus, not long after the TV started, Nian was completely immersed in it. When she was in high spirits, this silly girl would even excitedly stand on the bed and dance her arms and legs to imitate the moves on TV. Hey, father, take this. Eat my Xianming divine palm. Hey, don't move. Father, you're frozen by me. Ha 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 ha. Now that martial arts were popular, the students in the class would occasionally exchange a few moves with each other. Naturally, Nian was no exception. However, she was after all a girl. And at the same time, she was also the class monitor of the 6th grade class too. Thus, she naturally couldn't be like the others who fooled around with each other. Thinking about it, only in front of Chun could she be like the other children and show her innocent side without any hindrance. Nian excitedly jumped around on the bed. Chun sat on the edge of the bed with a fatherly smile on his face. The cold wind whistled outside the room, but the room was warm and harmonious. The only thing that made people feel a little regretful was that Ying was still in closed-door cultivation. No one knew when she would successfully break through to the golden core stage. Because of this, Nian even moved next door to live with Chun. Father, when will mother finish revising her homework? It feels like she hasn't been out for a long time. Perhaps it was because the hearts of father and daughter were connected, so when Chun thought of Qin Ruoying, Nian had already opened her mouth to ask. Should be soon. Don't worry, don't worry. Chun didn't give a definite answer. After all, core formation was like childbirth. Even if you knew that the child was already pregnant, you couldn't be sure exactly when the child would be born. Of course, cesarean section was an exception. Speaking of which, it was a coincidence. Just as the father and daughter were talking, an extremely strong wave of true essence suddenly surged in the courtyard. Immediately after, an earth-shattering muffled sound of thunder rang in the sky. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The rolling thunder suddenly sounded. Even though they were separated by a window, Nian was shocked. It's thunder. Father, it's thunder. Is it going to rain? In the middle of winter, there's actually thunder. Nian was now a top student, so she clearly remembered that her natural science teacher once said that the formation of thunderclouds generally required 2 conditions, which were sufficient water vapor and intense convective movement. The temperature in winter was dry, and the sun's radiation was weak, so it was basically impossible for thunder to appear. Thus, as soon as the thunder roared, the little girl lay on the bed and quickly crawled to the window. As the saying went, thunder in winter, 9 out of 10 cattle fences were empty. Thunder in winter was news that would appear on TV. Nian was excitedly waiting for the thunder to sound again, but Chun frowned and looked in the direction of the room next door. No, this was not Ying's aura. Although Ying was only 1 step away from core formation, this step was not so easy to cross. Rumble. The rolling thunder sounded again. Immediately after, a ray of light suddenly flashed in the sky. Whoa! Nian subconsciously took a cold breath, because she saw with her own eyes that the lightning struck the center of their yard. Father, father. Perhaps because she was too excited, Nian's voice changed a lot. She called out a couple of times. When she looked back, she found that Chun had left the room at some point. This made Nian anxious. Therefore, she did not care whether it was still raining or thunder outside and rushed out of the room. Father? Where did you go? While shouting for her father, Nian opened the door. However, as soon as she stepped out of the door, she was lifted up by a gentle force. What's wrong? Are you scared? I forgot to mention that during this period of time, people were on tenterhooks. It was said that 210,000 books were banned from the city channel. The boss of Jinjiang was also invited for tea. This was the strictest in history, so during this period of time, everyone was frantically self-examining. Forgive me, keep a low profile. Since I just had a breakthrough, why don't I go over and see if there's anything I can help with and consolidate my current cultivation level? I'll leave the family to you. When Yingying comes out, remember to inform me. When the time comes, I'll call Yongwang and Chuanju. Our family should also have a good gathering. After some advice, Qin Yongyan followed little Wang out of the courtyard. Chunxi held Nianyan's hand and stood behind the door to say goodbye to him. Although Qin Yongyan said that he just wanted to go to Wu Lian for a cup of tea, he and Chunxi both knew that this trip would take some time. Although Wang Chuanju didn't say it explicitly, her actions had already explained. She should have encountered some problems recently. It couldn't be helped. Who told his sister-in-law to sneak to the Supreme Palace enclosure? Without a powerful fighter like Qin Xueqing, Wang Chuanju's work was naturally difficult, so she needed the help of her family. After all, the people living in this courtyard were a family. Even if Wang Chuanju and her husband didn't come back all year round, their room would always be there. Okay, Dad. After listening to Qin Yongyan's advice, Chunxi nodded silently. To be honest, in Qin Yongyan's words, he actually felt a trace of the warmth of a family. Unlike the small family he and Yingying formed, the warmth of a big family was usually impossible to feel. But this gentle and silent warmth was no less than the weight of his and Yingying's small family. Thinking about it, they could think, fantasize, quarrel, fall in love, lie, be jealous, and even chase after stars like adults. And only in this way would they be a complete human. As the rest of the students entered the classroom, Li Tongyue's empty seat became more and more conspicuous. And this also cast a shadow over Nianyan's originally good mood. Her mood suddenly became a little gloomy, so after finishing the work at hand, she directly returned to her seat and spaced out. There were still a few minutes before class started, so most of the students returned to their seats to prepare for class. But at this moment, the skinny monkey suddenly jumped into the classroom from the back door and opened his mouth to shout, "Extra, extra! There's big news again. Do you want to hear it?" The skinny monkey said as he waved the paper in his hand. "Why are you keeping us in suspense? Hurry up. Yeah, hurry up and tell us." As the little smart guy in the class, the skinny monkey liked to go around collecting news, and then bring the news back to the class firsthand to gain the attention of the students. Therefore, when the skinny monkey heard the students' agreement, he suddenly laughed proudly. "Dang dang dang dang, look! This is a love letter from Zhongchen from the next class to our class leader. It's so mushy. Do you want me to read it to you?" The first half of the 6th grade semester was coming to an end. In a few more months, everyone present would be able to successfully remove the label of primary school students and become secondary school students. Therefore, some of the precocious children were now even more unscrupulous. According to past experience, it should be a very secretive behavior for elementary school students to send love letters to each other. However, the skinny monkey got the information from somewhere, so his words immediately caused quite a stir in the class. "Read it. Hurry up and read it. Hurry up. The teacher is coming. Our class leader skipped 2 grades. Is Zhongchen an old cow eating young grass?" Ha 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 ha. It had to be said that hearing the words "an old cow eating young grass" from the mouth of these little brats was a bit strange. But, as far as everyone in the class was concerned, no one felt that there was anything wrong with this sentence. Instead, they all agreed. This was because in this school, the 6th grade students were the oldest. Of course, this did not include Nianyan. The skinny monkey usually liked to play to the gallery, so when he received such a rare file, he was even more excited. Therefore, the moment he received the response of the students, this kid opened the envelope and read it directly. "Then I'll read it. Everyone listen up. Chen Nian. Hello, I'm Zhongchen from the 6th grade class 2. Nice to meet you. Actually, I've always wanted to." The skinny monkey read the contents of the envelope with great emotion. However, he had only just read the beginning of the letter when his voice was suddenly interrupted by a stationery box that was thrown at him. Bang! The stationery box did not hit the skinny monkey. Instead, it hit the wall not far away from him. Even so, this sudden loud noise still shocked everyone. Then, under everyone's gaze, Nian walked in front of the skinny monkey with an expressionless face. "Give it to me." It was a simple and powerful word. At that moment, the skinny monkey looked at the class leader, who was a few centimeters shorter than him, in front of him, and felt terrified from the bottom of his heart. He was frightened by Nian's gaze. It had been so long since school started, but this was the first time the skinny monkey saw Nian reveal such a gaze. It was a gaze that was cold enough to make people tremble. It was like a queen with a strong aura. The skinny monkey was obviously frightened. He quickly stuffed the envelope into Nian's hands and ran back to his seat like a wisp of smoke. Then he lowered his head and did not dare to say a word. For a moment, the entire classroom was silent. Rip. With a soft sound, Nian tore the envelope in her hand into pieces and threw them into the trash can. Then, she slowly turned around and glanced at everyone in the room with an expressionless face. Very fun, right? Chapter 568. She looked at the skinny monkey who liked to play to the gallery, and then looked at the students who were blindly cheering. At that moment, Nian's mood was particularly complicated. She had been to many classes and met many new students, but there was really no class that was as cold as 6th grade class 2. This class seemed to be united on the surface, but in their bones, it was like a sandstone fortress. With a gentle splash of water, such a huge fortress would instantly turn into scattered sand. Just like now, she was the sudden splash of cold water. Unlike the classes Nian had been in before, the students in 6th grade class 2 preferred to see others embarrassed, and some even took pleasure in it. Not only one person, but the whole class was like this. The reason for this phenomenon was actually very simple. Because everyone in the class had witnessed the whole process of Li Tangyue being excluded. They were very afraid that one day they would become the same person as Li Tangyue. Don't underestimate the influence of a class on a child. After all, this was the only group they could come into contact with after leaving home. Since they had come to a new group, there were obviously only 2 choices in front of them as independent individuals. Either integrate into it or drift away. How to integrate? That was to work harder to exclude others and use them as a shield to make themselves safer and less likely to be discovered if they hid in the crowd. Looking at the entire capital-affiliated primary school, such a problematic class was actually very rare. Only some specific factors could create such a special situation. Therefore, when Nian first came to this class, she didn't find any difference between this class and the other classes. If 6th grade class 2's class was exclusive, then Nian, who had always been upright and friendly, obviously couldn't agree with such a collective atmosphere. She was like a gust of wind blowing from the mountains, with a completely different smell, and was bound to blow away the stench that permeated the classroom. Of course, this was definitely not something that could be done overnight. If there had to be a word to describe it, then the word must be influence. Like a preacher, she used her words and actions to influence everyone around her. When they were no longer able to form a group, a new collective will would be born from this. After all, Nian was not Li Tangyue. Although she was young, she was not someone to be bullied. Therefore, when Nian threw a tantrum, the class immediately quieted down. The entire classroom was silent. Because he was afraid that Nian would beat him up, the skinny monkey was so scared that he didn't even dare to raise his head. But the good thing was Nian tore up the letter in her hand and threw it away. She had no intention of denouncing him. Instead, she silently returned to her seat. There were so many people who liked her, so what was a mere Zhongchen? Regarding this, Nian did not even take it to heart. Perhaps only the students in the class who had never seen the world would find this kind of thing very novel, right? The silence in the classroom did not last long. Soon, a melodious ringtone sounded in the corridor. Now for the morning reading, please turn to page 22, The Story of the Deer and the Wolf. According to the teacher's previous instructions, after the ringtone sounded, Nian picked up the textbook and went directly to the podium. This was already an old rule, so even if the teacher had not arrived yet, The students picked up their textbooks and read aloud with Nian Nian. Roosevelt would never have thought that the wolf he ordered to kill was actually the protector of the forest. It seems cruel for a wolf to eat a deer, but it maintains the stability of the deer population. Accompanied by a burst of neat reading, the teacher quickly walked into the classroom. Everyone, stop for a moment, I have something to announce. As soon as the teacher entered the door, she clapped her hands and directly interrupted the students' morning reading. Seeing this, Nian Nian thought that the teacher was going to use the morning reading time to lecture everyone again. So she immediately picked up her textbook and walked off the podium. But the moment she turned around and walked off the podium, Nian Nian suddenly froze in place, because she saw the figure standing outside the classroom door. Li Tangyue. Because of her health, Li Tangyue applied for 2 months of leave from me. Now she has finally returned safely. So I hope everyone can welcome her with warm applause. Applause. After that, the teacher took the lead in applauding. Unlike the teacher's enthusiasm, after the students heard the words Li Tangyue, they were obviously a little uninterested. It was as if they had not eaten breakfast. In the sparse applause, only Nian Nian was clapping hard. Then, the figure who had been hiding outside the door slowly walked into the classroom under the encouragement of the teacher's eyes. F***CK. Li Tangyue. Look, is this Li Tangyue? Wow, she is Li Tangyue. Are you kidding me? The ancients said, a scholar who has been away for 3 days should be looked at with new eyes. How long had Li Tangyue been gone? It seemed to be more than 2 months. In everyone's impression, Li Tangyue was actually like an old sow in a pigsty, fat and smelly. However, the figure who slowly walked into the classroom was completely different from everyone's impression. Was this really Li Tangyue? Although fatties were all potential stocks, wasn't this too exaggerated? Li Tangyue was tall to begin with. She was at least half a head taller than Nian Nian. She was estimated to be at least 1.65 meters tall. Children nowadays were well nourished. In the north 1.65 meters was not too unusual. From the red brick walls of the Forbidden City to the large courtyard of Prince Gong's mansion. From the magnificent atmosphere of the old summer palace to the lively marketplace of Nanluogu Alley. After she pulled the two brothers and played all the famous scenic spots around Shangjing City, the long-awaited New Year's Eve quietly came again, January 24th. New Year's Eve. Early in the morning, the Sai courtyard ushered in the most lively time of the year. Just as Nian Nian pulled the two brothers to help put up the Spring Festival couplets, Qin Yongyan also brought Qin Yongwang and his wife back to the Sai courtyard. After a while of greetings, Chen Shi, as the host, arranged the seats in the main hall. Of the 3 elders of the Qin family, Gu Lao's family, other than Qin Ruoying who was still in seclusion, Qin Xueqing who was far away in outer space, might not be able to make it back in time. Chen Shi did not ask Gu Lao why he did not return to his hometown this year. In any case, as long as Gu Lao was willing, he would naturally open the door to welcome him. Anyway, the more people there were, the livelier it was, right? Chapter 570. This year was a leap year, so there was one more day in February than in previous years. And because of this, it was destined that this year would be completely different from the previous years. The bustle in the courtyard lasted from New Year's Eve to the first day of the new year. The 3 little guys also felt a different new year in this lively atmosphere. There was no doubt that today's bustle would become an indelible memory of their lives. The weather this year should be good. Although it was not yet February, there was no haze of the past when looking up, and the bright sun seemed to silently announce the arrival of the warm spring. This was the so-called New Year. Looking at the 3 little guys in the courtyard who were gradually growing up, the elders could not help but show a sincere smile on their faces. Thinking about it, it was only during such a special festival like the Spring Festival that everyone could find that long-lost pleasure in the bustling atmosphere, right? In the main hall, the elders of the Qin family and Gu Lao were talking happily. In the courtyard, the three little guys were jumping up and down playing. The firecrackers of the first day of the new year were nonstop, and the people of the country seemed to be immersed in this happy atmosphere. Only Chun-Shi was standing quietly in a daze outside the west wing at this moment. "Dad, what are you thinking about?" Nian noticed Chun-Shi's strange behavior. So, after playing with the two brothers in the courtyard for a while, she came up to Chun-Shi while panting, and then used her big eyes to size up Chun-Shi. "Nothing, I'm waiting for your mom. When she finishes reviewing her homework, we can go out and play with you. Then can I go in and urge Mom?" Obviously, the little girl was a little impatient. Seeing this, Chun-Shi just smiled and pinched her little face, then gently shook his head. "No, homework is very important, just like your winter homework. If you don't finish it, Mom will be scolded by the teacher. Isn't today the new year? The teacher said that we don't have to do homework during the new year." Chun-Shi's explanation obviously did not convince her. Therefore, Nian suddenly pouted with an unhappy face. "What homework is so important? The teacher said that we don't have to do homework during the new year." "Good girl, Mom is an adult. Of course adults and children are different. How about this, you guys discuss where you want to go to play later. When Mom is done here, Dad will take you guys directly, okay?" After Chun-Shi's patient appeasement, the little girl finally gave up the idea of going to the west wing to find her mother, and happily discussed the itinerary with the brothers. The clingy little girl finally ran away. Then, the smile on Chun-Shi's face suddenly turned serious. He was in a bad mood. It was not because of a certain matter or a certain person, but because he was in a bad mood. For a moment, not only was Chun-Shi happy, but even Qin Yongyan subconsciously turned to look at the west wing. This scene was somewhat familiar. However, due to the limitations of Chun-Shi's restrictions, Qin Ruoying did not cause a phenomenon in the sky like Qin Yongyan did when she broke through. There was no wind. There was no snow. There was no lightning or thunder. Everything was still so calm. In the entire courtyard, only Chun-Shi and Qin Yongyan sensed Qin Ruoying's breakthrough. Feeling the gradually calming fluctuation of true essence, Chun-Shi's face finally revealed a trace of a smile. He only needed to wait for another half an hour. After Ying adjusted her breath and adapted to her current state, she should be able to officially come out of seclusion and show herself. Thinking of this, Chun-Shi stood up and waved at Nian, ready to ask her where she wanted to go later. But at this moment, an unexpected burst of true essence suddenly lifted the roof of the west wing, instantly breaking through the layers of restrictions that Chun-Shi had set up. It soared into the sky, straight into the clouds. Then, in front of Nian's stunned expression, a navy blue lotus gradually rose from the roof of the west wing. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.